Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome this evening. I'd like to call to order the regular council meeting for Monday, December 13th at 6:30 p.m. I would like to acknowledge that with respect that we are meeting on the shared territory of the Lekwungen speaking people, and we are honored to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. I'm looking for approval of this evening's agenda for the near term, long term, and regular council agenda for December 13th. Seeing if there's no errors or questions, then I will assume that it's received unanimously, which will move us on to 3, public participation. Oh, yes, go ahead, Councillor Day.
Sorry, just.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. I'm sorry. I have to shift you in. Go ahead.
So tonight's agenda is extremely long, and it is our last council meeting of 2021. And I understand the reasons for it being so long, but I will be voting in opposition to the agenda because I just think that's too much on one night.
Okay, thank you. Then I will actually, I will look for a mover and seconder because we're going to need to call the vote. So moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by Councillor Parkinson. This is in regards to the long-term, short-term, and regular council meeting agenda for December 13th. Those in opposition, Councillor Day opposes. Moving on to public participation. I'm sorry, I've got all sorts of notes I've got to go to. For public participation, we have 5 written submissions were received. 1 item regarding 6.1, 3 items regarding 7.3, 1 item regarding 7.4. And there are 7 to 9 people registered this evening to speak via telephone. And clearly we have people in the audience as well. During public, and this is for the audience, so I please, if you can, just pay attention to this if you could. During public participation, members of the public will be provided an opportunity to present concerns or ask questions of council. Comments pertaining to the following matters that have been subject to a public hearing are prohibited at this meeting. Bylaw number 1898, cannabis retail at 1905 Soup Road. Bylaw number 1908, CD 31 3554 Ryder Heshtall Way, and bylaw number 1912 CD 32 791 Drummond Way. You are encouraged to make your views known. However, the following rules apply to all public participation. Comments must be respectful of council, city staff, and other members of the public. Inappropriate language, outbursts, or criticisms aimed at individuals or groups will not be tolerated. There are 20 minutes allocated for public participation this evening. A vote of council to extend would be by the majority will allow us to go past the 20 minutes. All I would ask for this evening, if you are making comments, that I would just ask the audience to please don't cheer or boo or clap or anything along those lines. The whole idea is that we're providing a safe opportunity for everybody to come here and speak. And so we want to make sure if people have differings of opinion that they still feel comfortable to come and stand at the podium. With that, I will welcome individuals to come to the podium. This is public participation time. We also have, as I said, 7 to 9 people online. So what I think I'm going to do this evening is try and rotate. I'll go with somebody who's online, and then I will, or somebody who's at the podium, and then back and forth. And then when we get to the 20-minute mark, I'll come to council to see if we could extend it. So saying that, I will welcome anyone who wishes to speak. What I'm going to ask, last thing before anybody comes up, because we have so many people and so many people wishing to speak this evening, I'm going to ask that we're going to try and keep it to about 3 minutes. And so I'm going to just ask you if you can stay within that period. I will give you a warning as you're getting close to that 3 minutes so that you can sort of tidy up your thoughts. Saying that, again, I will welcome individuals. How about we go to somebody online first, and then we can go to, if there's anybody who wishes to come up to the podium. While that person's speaking online, please feel free to come up to the podium.
Okay, so our first person tonight is Heleninson. Can you please press *6 to unmute yourself?
Thank you. Gosh, the first up, 3 minutes. Okay. So good evening, Mayor and Council. My name's Heleninson Stinson, and I live at 305 Perimeter Place. We want to thank you for the opportunity that we get to speak tonight. I'm doing it in place of my husband, who unfortunately had a conflicting church meeting tonight. We wanted to share that we reviewed and listened to reports, briefings, plans regarding the waterfront improvement plan that happened between April of this year till December 10th. And we can see there's an abundance of documentation that has been developed as a result of the project. We can see considerable mind share has clearly gone into all aspects of it and considerations regarding this plan. And generally, it is appropriate to applaud the efforts and the time that's been spent in regards to this very important ecologically sensitive land waterway for Callwood resident taxpayers. So we're hoping that council members have reviewed and reflected on the full details that have led up to the Hope Bridge reintroduction and the motion that's before you on as agenda item 7.4. So the following are some key factors that we pulled from the materials that we got from the city's meeting portal that we feel should form at least be part of your reflection prior to making any decision regarding reintroduction of the Hope Bridge component. First, we wanted to identify that it's regarding the statistical data that has been conducted in regards to all the surveys conducted formally versus informally, and that were available through the Let's Talk website, and those that were linked to the Waterfront Improvement Plan website pages. For example, we're wondering where the results were from the survey conducted, which was linked to the Waterfront Improvement Plan website that had several thousand of responses, but has been removed or appear to have hidden from public view, that show that over 80% of the respondents replied to leave the bird sanctuary alone as last viewed prior to its removal. There was significant statistics and data facts provided as part of reports to committees and councils regarding that 2020 survey, yet now it seems to be summarized and generalized and have been more of a norm in more recent reports that we've been seeing regarding public surveys and consultations on the topic, at least of the Waterfront Improvement Plan. So we're wondering why have the details and supportive facts have not been provided? And if, do the facts and data align with the generalizations that have been made? Respectfully, not seeing those details lends itself to support which point of view. If this detailed supportive data has been provided to the public as well as the committees and councils, our sincere apologies. But if they've not been provided that detail, it would seem to suggest the motion before you should be at least deferred until such time as the sizable supporting facts are provided to your Callwood taxpayers and council. This way, everyone can properly comment and make better informed, responsive decisions. We also identified that in looking at the April 12th background report on the shoreline assessment, it showed that the 2020 statistics regarding public opinion in what would be considered detailed enough to understand, the public voice was broken out by Callwood residents, adjoining municipalities, and overall public input. These are the types of figures that should be present in all documents along the process that can substantiate the generalizations and thus allow council to make an informed decision on all aspects of the plan, not just in regards to the Hope Bridge. We also noticed in one of the 2021 Waterfront Coastal Process Committee video that was shown on October the 28th that there was a very good...
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm going to ask you to, sorry, that was your 3 minutes. So I'll give you an opportunity to sort of finish up.
Okay, really appreciate that. We just want to identify that the public's voice, that there was an overwhelming response to remove the Hope Bridge based upon that one October 28th process committee video. But in November 28th, there was another committee video where we noticed that it got reversed out, and it didn't seem to identify that the public had an overwhelming response to remove the whole bridge, that it wasn't even taken into consideration. Rather, it got reintroduced just because a few people identified that they liked the bridge concept and it felt it would not impact the bird sanctuary, when there was definitely material within other attachments that identified from other external organizations that there could be potential adverse impact to the migratory birds. So we're just identifying that basically, please take that into consideration of these other things that have been done. And when you do make a vote, make sure it's one that has supporting factual information. So again, I'd like to thank everybody for your time to listen to it. And we're just hoping that urging council to reject or defer at least the motion regarding reintroducing the Hope Bridge component to the waterfront improvement plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have our next speaker, and I'm sorry, one of the other things I failed to mention was if you could just identify your name and address for us, that'd be great. Thank you. Oh, yes, if you could hit the mic for us.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I'm Brian Semenko. I live at Callwood Place, and I'm opposed to the rezoning of 3460 and 3461 Veterans Memorial Parkway. Now, if I'm too loud, just let me know. I won't be offended, but that tends to be my habit at times. More than 1,200 Callwood residents have already said no to these 4 6-story buildings next to Havenwood Park. Callwood has received hundreds of emails, letters, and people phoning in voicing their opposition. In comparison, the 10 or so people supporting this development proposal have been mostly the developer's employees. In response to our Preserve Havenwood petition, the developer hired people to canvass Callwood residents, and they asked to sign a form, and the developer's form states, "We're proposing a mixed-use multifamily development to supplement Callwood's growing community as part of the next phase of Wishart Road development. We intend to have a medical walk-in clinic, a neighborhood pub restaurant, and a local coffee and pastry shop." This is the form people have been asked to sign by BC Alta. It focuses mainly on possible amenities. It does not say anything about 4 6-story buildings or 3 levels of underground parking being built beside Havenwood Park. I contend that BC Alta's form or petition is deliberately misleading, and its results do not represent what residents of Callwood actually want for this area. The proposal is 280 apartments consisting of over 400 bedrooms. That's 500 to 600 people over 400 vehicles. So instead of going for a pleasant woodland stroll, you'll be accosted by the size of the buildings and the noise of hundreds of people and vehicles in this area. Any future lack of care and maintenance for these buildings and grounds will spill into Havenwood and become the city's problem. Many of these problems, especially the density, could have been resolved building 3-story townhomes or mitigated by lowering the height of the apartment blocks. This could easily retain the latest proposed footprint and would reduce the underground parking, the overall construction time, and the buildings would be more in sync to the surrounding neighborhood. But the developer has not been willing to compromise. Yes, he decreased the number of apartments only because it exceeded the floor area ratio allowed. He removed the rooftop patios because the structures made the building 7 stories high. He was compelled to increase the setbacks because 6-story buildings should not be less than 10 feet from somebody's home. These are not compromises. These are getting caught bending the rules. These changes were made because our committee members, through numerous emails and letters, brought this to the attention of Callwood staff. The developer's phase 1 project, Wishart Gardens, after 6 years, construction of the 40 houses is still not finished, 44 houses. Phase 2 of his new 48-unit condo building is at a standstill. After phase 2 is clear cut and blasted, it now sits idle. Based on this developer's track record and the scale of the new proposal, construction beside Havenwood could go on for years, 10 years, who knows? Beside the scale of the proposal and the sensitive site location, a great deal can go wrong because of the scale of the proposal. Does Callwood have the staff and resources to watch over this project to ensure the developer is following all the complicated, expensive procedures that are required as per the reports? At this point in the process, council can consider 3 options. One of which is the application can be denied. It's time for the developer to compromise, to deliver a plan that the citizens of Callwood can accept. It's time for our elected leaders to show they are listening to the Callwood voters. However, currently, not all the councillors are present, so you may consider deferring this important agenda item to a future meeting. In closing, I've read all the reports on this proposal, and there's a lot of lipstick on this pig, but that's what happens when the pig is 6 stories high. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I forgot to mention, and thank you, Brian, for reminding me. Councillor Kobayashi is not here this evening, and he did let me know ahead of time, and he had a personal family emergency, and he was very disappointed that he wasn't able to be here this evening. So thank you. Let's go to the next person online.
The next person we have online is Chris Millington. Can you please press *6 to unmute yourself?
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, hi. You want me to start?
Yes, please.
Okay, my name is Chris Millington. I live at 553 Delora Drive. I have been a resident of Callwood for 32 years, having lived in Callwood Creek Estates, Dresler Road, and for the last 25 years, Delora Drive. We had a choice to live anywhere in Canada, but we chose British Columbia, Vancouver Island, and specifically Callwood. We have raised 3 university-educated children here. My talk here today is in support of Mr. Perry Soroya. I first met Mr. Soroya when he lived in a small house on his property on Wishart Road. He said to me that he was going to build beautiful homes. I thought it was quite something that he had a vision for the land. As a testament to Mr. Soroya and the Delora Drive development, he has indeed built beautiful homes. They have a contemporary design that are smart, have solar panels on the roofs, and have spectacular ocean views. The true testament of his work is that one only has to look at the turnover of the homes that he has built. They don't turn over. The owners do not sell as they are happy with their purchases. He has carried through with the development to completion with all the homes being sold and occupied. In regard to VMP development, the reality is that many families cannot afford to live in Callwood. The price of homes are beyond most families. I believe Callwood Council has a fiduciary responsibility to create an environment for young families and families to move into Callwood, therefore providing the tax base to the city and provide the needed services for an ever-aging population. Therefore, greater density is required so that young families can afford to move into our community. There has and will always be the attitude, oh yes, I agree, but not in my backyard. Somewhere else, please. Well, it has to be in our backyard as we need young families to continue the lifestyle that we in Callwood are so privileged to have. Therefore, I support Mr. Soroya in his development along VMP. He will complete the project in the same efficient manner as his Delora Drive project and will provide needed housing to many, many families. Some will say, okay, but not now, and will want to kick the can down the road. But when? When is now? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see we have our next person at the podium. So if you can just hit your mic and you're good to go. Oh, sorry, you need to hit it. It needs to be red up there. So there you go.
It needs to be red. Oh, okay. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. My name is Kim Jordyn, and I live at 3429 Hopwood Place. I am opposed to the rezoning of 3460, 3461 VMP, or now called Aspen Landing. The Director of Engineering and Development stated in a previous meeting that staff always strive to have the highest amount of density that is allowable under the OCP on a particular piece of property. Is it not? Sorry. Okay. Because of this, I feel that council will unfortunately continue to receive biased advice from the planning and development staff. So tonight, it's council's responsibility to make the right choice about what is most appropriate on this site. Before you, you have been given 3 options from city staff. But as a council, you must also weigh in on 3 other factors that have been pushed aside. One of them is the concerns expressed about the density of this development so close to Havenwood Park by the residents of this community, over at least 1,200 of them. Number 2, the expert advice provided by HAT, TLC, and the Friends of Havenwood Park, stating that this development poses significant risks to Havenwood Park. And 3, the OCP, a guiding document only created a few years ago that significantly contradicts the views of the planning and development city staff, but yet reminds us of how vitally important parks and open space are to the residents of Callwood and how cherished our natural assets are. It remains critical that council has a vision that the community shares. Havenwood Park is a natural park that taxpayers paid for, and it deserves to be protected. This development, although it be a great development, is in the wrong location, and no compromises have been made to date. Please, I urge all of you to vote this development down tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Let's go to the next person online.
Okay, our next person online is Tom Pierce. Can you please press *6 to unmute yourself and state your name and address? Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Tom Pierce. I live at 101-539 Delora Drive. I'd like to thank council for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm speaking on the 7.3, the Aspen Landing, in which my wife and I are speaking in favor of this development. First off, I'd like to speak as past president of the Delora Drive strata here that I live in. I met BC Alt and Mr. Soroya a couple years ago when we purchased our house here. As a president of any new strata development, there's always growing pains and things to be ironed out to get things up and running, and as how everybody expects them here. In my dealings with BC Alt, our dealings with them were always handled in a professional and caring manner. We were always able to work together to come to mutually agreeable solutions on any issues that came up, and BC Alt and Mr. Soroya were always there to make whatever adjustments or alterations that we needed to do to get things done and complete this development here, which is now complete, fully sold as I speak. As a homeowner, my wife and I both know that Mr. Soroya had a vision when he came here and bought this property, and his vision and for our development was very important to him. He wanted to create a tranquil environment for these 22 homes that are here for people to enjoy this lovely community of Callwood, and he has done that. BC Alt is also through us as homeowners. We're very easy to approach and discuss any deficiencies and repairs that were needed for our particular suite here, which again, there always are in a new build, and it was handled always in a professional manner, and everything was completed to our satisfaction. As for the development that we're looking for here tonight, I believe that this will help fill a need within our community, and I do believe it is the responsibility not only of council, but also as us as citizens to help people that are possibly less fortunate than we are in today's real estate world. I looked at a lot of numbers online, and I've gone with the Victoria real estate numbers regarding rental vacancy in Victoria, which currently sits at 2.2%. We have medium house prices. Again, this is the Victoria real estate boards, but all the numbers were within a few $1,000s of each. We have a medium house price of $990,000 and an average house price of approximately $1.2 million. This is a tough unit for young people to get into, and I believe that this project will help fill that gap. These rental units will help citizens across all ages, from university grads to single parents to young couples, families, and seniors. With the property being very easily accessible off of a current and established main route, it doesn't traverse through
Excuse
any...
me, sorry, you're at your 3 minutes, so I'm going to just ask you to sort of finish
Okay.
up for us.
Okay, I will summarize up very quickly that as it doesn't pass through any neighborhoods and it goes through the main route, that if the plan is as presented, is followed and monitored by Callwood, as has already been mentioned this evening, that this needs to be guided through the whole process so that we ensure that it's completed in the manner in which we have looked at here. My wife and I, again, speak in favor of this development. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Council, we are at 20 minutes, so I will need a motion to extend public. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Jansen. Do I have a seconder to that motion? Seconded by Councillor Day. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. Yes, go ahead, hit that red button.
Yep.
And you're good to go. Thank you.
Okay. Mayor Martin, councillors, my name, sorry. Sure. Yeah, okay. Get a soapbox. Okay. Mayor Martin, councillors, my name is Margaret Abercrombie Hutchin, and I live at 3433 Hopwood Place here in Callwood. I oppose the development at 3460 and 3461 Veterans Memorial. And today I want to talk about the big picture. This development will generate a population of between 500 to 700 people. There is no doubt that this will impact Havenwood Park's environment, both in vegetation and habitat, whether it be the additional population or the noise of the humming building systems of these large apartment buildings, the environment will change. The character of the neighborhood is not in keeping with the OCP. There has not been a transition from single detached homes to apartments. This development indicates that this transition has skipped the possibility of townhouses, duplexes, condos, and low-rise apartments, three levels and below. And I heard what you said last week, Mayor Martin, on this CTV Island News, that the way forward to affordable housing is townhouses. Why can't this be an answer to affordable housing here, and why not here on this land? Why are we accepting a proposal when we know there's an alternative? But there has not been a compromise. We've talked about compromising, but there hasn't been one. I would like to ask this council, will the voters next fall care about being fourth in population? Will the voters be happy that it appears this council prefers to focus on densification and development at the expense of our natural environment? Do the voters want our city developed as Langford? Don't let this happen. Be the council that the voters of 2018 and the voters of 2022 believe will protect the environment, abide by the OCP, and encourage developments that are subject to the values Callwood has already set. Please vote to deny this development. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go online.
Okay, our next person is Mike Hallmark. Mike, please press *6 to unmute yourself.
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay, wonderful. Okay, so hello, my name is Mike Hallmark. I reside at 115539 Delora Drive. And thank you for the opportunity to talk. I'll be speaking in favor of the BC Alta developments this evening. I'm not going to speak to the technical side, as I don't carry any degrees in any of these fields, or don't believe I'm an expert or type of authority in geology or environmentalism. However, I can speak to the lack of housing in our community, and there's been a massive need for it. And unlike in Victoria, there's an opportunity to plan our community's growing needs. Greater Victoria is facing a historical housing shortage in both rentals and available homes for sale, and everybody can see that. In regards to Parminder Soroya and BCLP developments, I know character doesn't mean much in the process of building, but I think it should be a consideration. This company wants to build in our growing community, and not knowing or caring about the type of character these people bring is really short-sighted. As a resident, it matters to me to know if the builder is going to follow through with the future vision of our community, or if they're just going to do the bare minimum, pad their pockets, and leave behind an inferior building, which I've seen many times before. BC Alta is a family business with a vision that wants to create and build something that our community doesn't have and desperately needs. They are willing to build something that we can be proud of. Speaking in direct regards to Havenwood Park, we absolutely have to protect our green spaces. But from what I understand, BC Alta is offering 57% of the land for green space that would add onto the 40-acre park, which is 9 acres, which is, according to my math, an additional 22.5% parkland. So that's addition, not subtraction. That's my math anyway. I think we have to recognize not many developers would offer that based on the cost of land in Callwood or anywhere around us. In today's market, depending on the zoning, that land would have a price tag, a value of between 14 and 18 million, and that to me is pretty substantial. The previously approved 21 home development had considerably less green space, so if it's based on environmental impact, of course, this proposal should be looked at. Also, I think there's been a false narrative out there about the developers trying to develop a park beside a park, encroaching on a park, which he doesn't own. BC Alta owns the private land next to the park, which they respect and are attempting to preserve by adding to the park. Because of BC Alta, I live in Greater Victoria's first solar-powered community. It's the first of its kind in Victoria for one reason. Other builders wouldn't incur this expense. It's not cost-effective when you're trying to make a profit to be environmentally conscious, but these guys are. They don't build your average home. They invest their time and passion into their projects, and they see it as an extension of their family. And they believe that the bottom line is the builder is trying to work with the community to create a small footprint and increase the prosperity. And last thing I'd like to say is that I moved my family to Callwood because I saw the potential here for now and in the future more than any other community. So I'm in support of BC Alta developments. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have several other people online, but I encourage anybody to there's a button on the down low. There you go.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. My name is Paul Skite. I live at 3416 Resolution Way. Since the rezoning application for 360 and 361 Veterans Memorial was submitted in January, many citizens have expressed concerns about the scale and the density of the proposal to be located next to Havenwood Park. It's difficult to see how 280 units of 4 6-story apartments living next door to the park will not impact it in a significant way. Although much technical work has been completed to identify measures mitigating impacts on the wetlands and the riparian areas and other sensitive areas on the developer's land, there's virtually nothing that's been done in terms of impact assessments on the park and adjacent communities. The proposed development is still inconsistent with the OCP policies under the controlled growth areas and hillside neighborhoods. Namely, the size and density is not appropriate in hillside areas where you have slope of greater than 30% and where it's functioning in major critical hydrological functions. Secondly, gentle infilling is the primary use of single-family residential and ground-oriented housing areas, which is what is next door. Thirdly, apartment densification with commercial is a conflict in the sense that it does not fit with the character of low-scale residential uses. Fourth, the scale and massing does not respect adjacent neighborhoods at all. Fifth, the height and the minimum buffers compromise significant views, privacy, and security for adjacent communities. And finally, I'll repeat, the lack of impact assessment work on the park due to the development has not been done. Mr. Mayor, I'll reiterate the fact that you last Friday made a statement on CTV, which really supports very much the move towards townhomes. One has to ask the question why this isn't being considered at all. Why is council not requesting the developer to consider alternative housing options that would fit with the gentle infilling policy of the OCP? How can council ignore 1,200 plus signatures collected from Preserve Havenwood Park petition, all opposing the proposed scale of the development? Yes, extensive monitoring and reporting processes are proposed to ensure oversight for blasting, excavation, and construction. I wonder whether Callwood staff, having had major developments in this facility, who's going to be looking after and paying attention to this project? As others have said, this is a long-term project, and are there ever going to be adequate staff to monitor? Interestingly enough, Friends of Havenwood and the conservation covenant holders like HAT and TLC have also expressed deep concerns about this proposal and its impact on the park. How can Callwood allow road access onto park land for this development and still honor the provisions of the conservation covenant? So in closing, citizens of Callwood hold our elected officials to the highest standard in making sound decisions on land development and protecting our environment. We expect them to consider all options when evaluating the merits of a single proposal. Your decisions on this project and others will determine your legacy here as politicians in our community. Citizens will remember your choices as they ponder their decisions next fall. Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda, I will look to the next person online.
Our next speaker is Ralph Moran. Please press *6 to unmute yourself.
Sorry, Amanda, who was this?
Ralph Moran.
Ralph, if you are online, it's Mormon. Ralph, if you are able to hit star 9 or star 6.
Oh, sorry, I think he hung up. We do have another caller though, so if he comes back, I'll reach out to him. But if he comes back, I'll let him in. Our next person is Zoe Livia. Please press *6 to unmute yourself.
Okay, while we're waiting for, maybe what I'll do is look to the audience. If there's someone else who would like to speak, I'll go to you, and then we'll come back to, we'll see if staff can get a hold of the people online. So again, if you can just turn on your mic, that'd be great.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for letting me have the opportunity to speak. My name is Susan Scott. I live at 3440 Hopwood Place. I'm a newer member of the community in the past year and have had the pleasure of getting to know some of my neighbors that are here this evening. So I will keep this brief because we are pretty much of the same sound in terms of our voice with opposition to the 3460 and 3461 development of VMP. This is the OCP. I keep this in my house. We have gone through it extensively, as you know, based on all the communications that you received since the development was first introduced as the Wishart development. I can appreciate the people that are speaking on behalf of Mr. Soria, being neighbors and his real estate agent. However, I don't have the pleasure of being his neighbor and you know, having things fixed by him and that sort of thing. But I do appreciate the fact that they are speaking about character. And to me, that translates to the world of business. And I have not been privy to seeing favorable business practice with BC Alta. However, I would like to just find and try and strike a balance with Mr. Soria, with consideration and with your consideration, Council, with entertaining a smaller density growth process for this area. This area is, as Paul had mentioned, is designated for gentle infill. The higher density areas of Seaside Village and Callwood Corners are zoned for high density. And I am not opposed to development. I am not naive in thinking that we don't need to grow our tax base. And I love this community. And I won't go through obviously all the different points of the OCP, but being that is it a more recent objective and site planning that has gone into this, the work that you have done, the stakeholders, the community, I just don't see where this development as presented is striking the balance. And that is my personal view for trying to move forward with this development, delayed or otherwise, on how long this is going to take. We are very interested in supporting some growth there. It was initially noted as 21 single-family homes. It's a big jump from the original plan that was promoting close to 300 apartments, of which we have never understood that they were going to be listed as affordable. Now that the size has minimized somewhat, I still don't believe that the infrastructure that's in place, even combined with all the reports that we've read, are going to support the amount of traffic and needs of the community are going to, and that aside from the park itself, are not going to be positively impacted by this huge growth. I welcome the opportunity to, meet with people in our community to try and come to some form of balance, but I'm strongly opposed to the presentation that is as it sits right now. I can appreciate the amount of information that you are receiving, both for and against this development, and understand that there is a lot of time invested. We are very, very invested in our community, and we want to support growth, but not in this capacity. So thank you for the time to speak.
Thank you. Amanda, can we go back online?
Okay, so the other gentleman does not want to speak. I do still have Zoe Livia. I think there she is.
Yeah, I'm here. Did that work?
Yeah, we can hear you. So you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Start the time now. Okay, my name is Zoe Livia, and I am actually calling in and taking the time this evening to support the petition ahead for 3460 and 3461 Veterans Memorial. I would just like to start by going over a few factual pieces of data. When I read through the Capital Regional District's Callwood Housing Need Report and overview the summary of that, which was put forth in October of 2020, I want to point out that the rental vacancy rate is 0%. The demand for housing is incredible, and that is factual. The expected demand for housing units over the next 5 years in Callwood is 2,640 units. So if, as mentioned earlier, this development might provide 500 to 700 units for the community, that's not even scratching the surface of what's needed, but it is certainly adding to a problem. It is adding a solution to a problem in a big way. And I would say that townhomes, although yes, it makes sense in certain areas, it certainly doesn't make sense in this specific need of housing. So we have community members that desperately need housing. We have an opportunity to provide housing to help fill the gap. And I just can't see the logic myself in stepping back and holding back an opportunity for people to have that need somewhat fulfilled. As of 2020, in Callwood, 92 households are on the BC housing wait list. So if we're not stepping forward to provide housing and the amount of work that's already been done for this proposal, I just don't understand where the community members think people are going to go, and people need the housing. I propose that of the 1,200 signatures around protecting the park, none of those 1,200 people are in need of housing. And I think that's a very important point to note, that those voices are not being heard, and the people stepping forward, whether someone is a neighbor or has a screwdriver lent to them, none of which is mine, by a developer is irrelevant. The fact here is that housing is needed. We also have an aging population. We have people that lived in Callwood for years and years and years that will need to downsize. Where do we propose those people go? Are we supposed to uproot seniors from the comfort of their community and redirect them where? To farther out, to the city of Victoria? Like, this is not a solution. So the solution really is to add the housing now that will accommodate all the members of the community that will need it. When I look at the Victoria vacancy rate, it's the same. It's a little bit higher. There's 1% vacancy. They have almost 3,000 units needed in the next 5 years. We know that flows outwards into the western communities. Are we prepared?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're at our 3 minutes, so I would just ask that you sort of conclude your remarks for us.
Okay, I'll just summarize in conclusion. So my conclusion is that the research I've done, this developer has got a 35-year track record. He is a family-based business. He's donated without compensation globally to building housing for people in need. His track record is strong. What he's proposing for the community is beneficial to the people in need. And I think it also lines up with the OCP. And I believe that the members of council are going to make a decision in favor of homes for people in need. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll go to our next speaker.
Erich Schallhammer, 3449 Blue Sky Place. Very proudly speaking with a very Canadian accent. The point I would like to make is that development needs to be done holistically. We might be too focused on a need, like providing housing, and we do need housing, but we also have to consider that we do need other issues. We have to address other issues. We definitely need natural environments, access to natural environments, and protect those natural environments, like our parks, for the well-being of our citizens. Because when we have a high population density, people have to find their mental balance somewhere, and parks are their place for many. So we have to make sure that there is no further encroachment of the existing parks, and there's probably even need to think about new parks with more development happening, because we do actually have a mental health crisis. I'm talking being a volunteer of search and rescue, Antifuga Search and Rescue. We have increasing call for people who have major mental problems and do silly things because of that. So we do need parks for the well-being of our citizens, existing citizens, as well as future citizens.
Thank you. Amanda, do we have anyone else online?
We do not have anyone else online.
Okay, great. I will look to the public again, if there's anyone wishing to speak.
It's red now. Can I make a comment first? The speaker system, have we paid the bill? Could we get a warranty on it? Is there anything possible?
I take it it's a little quiet for you guys back there. Is it? Yeah, you're okay. Thank you for that. We'll figure out how to do that for the next one. Yeah, we can hear you guys fine. Just so you know, I guess we pointed the speakers this way rather than that way.
So you're fine with the telephone calls coming in as well?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we can hear everything, but I've never sat on that side, so my apologies. We'll figure that out in the weeks to come.
Okay. Just a moment, I'm going to get out of this thing. Okay, I'm John Briggs, 556 Delora Drive. I watched with great interest the development that BC Alberta Limited put in for phase 1. It was a steep bit of land, and the work that they did with terracing and twisting the Serpentine Road in, it makes a very pleasant change to flat, easygoing roads. And it was well received by, of course, the new owners and us, the adjoining neighbors. Phase one, well done. Now for the proposal before us tonight. Prior comments opposing the proposal are not true. I read the proposal to sign petitions on my mailbox some time ago, and I don't know what these people were doing, but it was during the time of fake news. And too many of the very few lines on there were not factual. The advantages of this development for me is I'm of the age where I'm approaching downsizing from my single family. An apartment will be affordable to me. Now, we're talking young people in most cases, but let's just look at the age that I have. I can stay in my home district and be next to a park that I am familiar with. The checks and balances that I've read on the most recent proposal by this company are more than enough to look after any bumps in the road as the development proceeds. Let's get ready for shovels. Thank you.
Thank you. I will look to the audience. We don't have anyone else online, so if there's anyone else wanting to speak, this is your opportunity. Unfortunately, you don't get to speak. Are you just coming up for?
No, I was going to ask you if I could just say something quickly, if I could speak, or.
I'm not sure what our policy. Sorry, I'm just Kim. I don't normally have an issue with it, but I'm just not sure what the policy is regarding public participation. If people are allowed to speak twice.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's really up to the chair and council, as council has not put an end time on this current public participation.
Okay, well, Kim, if you can just be respectful over time, but I'll let you go ahead and say it.
Okay, I'll just be really quick. I just wanted to clarify something in regards to Zoe's comments, I guess. We're not saying that you shouldn't build anything. We're not saying that nothing should be built there. I mean, it would be optimal to preserve the park in that way, but we're just saying there needs to be a compromise. And I'd really like to clarify, because I hear this all the time. Well, not clarify, but to tell you that there is not a housing shortage. There is a affordable housing shortage. There's a big difference between the two. You can't, as Mr. Soroya said here tonight, that he's offering affordable housing. Do we have an affordable housing program in Callwood? Do we have one? We do. So then part of his project should be affordable housing then. We're taking care of that, right? And we're not, the other thing I wanted to say is it's not up to Callwood to fix the problem for people where they're to go, where they're to live. Do you see Machosen breaking down their acreages and, saying, come on, let's all build and subdivide our properties? They're not in there doing that. So it's not up to any specific municipality. There's a balance that needs to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Just looking to the audience, is there anyone else?
Am I allowed to?
Yeah, I'm not going to do I'm sorry, I am going to cut it off because I don't want to I don't want to end up having a public debate back and forth. So, but thank you for your time, everyone. I'm going to, we do have a very long agenda this evening, and it doesn't look like I have anyone else looking as a first-time speaker. So I am going to move on. Mayor's message. 3 real quick things. First of all, I just want to say this. Listening tonight, there was a real diverse opinion on a lot of issues. And I have to say, I was really proud of our community. Whatever decisions end up being, I found all of you this evening incredibly respectful. I think you argued and presented your ideas in an amazingly respectful way to each other. And it's very contentious, and I know people are passionate about it, but I just wanted to say thank you, because I was sitting here this evening and just really appreciating that people were very thoughtful with what they brought. Second big thank you that I wanted to express was to Sangster Elementary. Last Friday, they were in Royal Bay, and both the primary and I'm not sure what the older kids are called, intermediate, sang for the community, and it was just a really positive evening. So I wanted to especially thank the music department and the music teacher at Sangster for stepping up and doing that. And then finally, just as mayor and as council, I would just like to wish everyone a happy holidays. This is our last council meeting until the new year. And for those of you who do celebrate Christmas, a Merry Christmas. And for everyone else, I hope that this is a joyful and peaceful time for each of you. I'm going to move on now to 5, adoption and receipt of minutes. Looking for adoption of the regular council meetings of November 22nd. I'll do that first. Moved by Councillor Jansen, seconded by Councillor Logan. Is there any discussion, errors, questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. I should just be cleaning this up fast. The receipt for the emergency planning meeting minutes of September 21st and the public hearing report of December 1st. Are there any errors, omissions, or issues? Otherwise, I will say they are accepted unanimously. Moving on to 6, correspondence requiring council direction. Council, we have a letter from Indecent Risotto looking to see if council would be at all interested in having food trucks year-round at the lagoon. Is there discussion or a recommendation, or Councillor Baxter?
I move that we refer this to staff to talk to Indecent Risotto to clarify the proposal and report back.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder to that? Seconded by Councillor Parkinson. So I'll go to discussion. Did you want to discuss it at all?
Yeah, because I think that there's some issues around the proposal by Indecent Risotto that may not be quite clear to all of us, and I think we need staff's input anyway. So I think it would be a good idea if they talked to these folks and then gave us their input.
Okay, thank you. You're good?
Yep.
Okay. Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Worship. I too have some questions, and I believe we were discussing at this very table, I believe last spring or the spring before, about having a permanent site down there that would be serviced. So I'm wondering how that fits with this letter. So I'd be interested to hear from staff. And I was going to say I would love to hear Ms. Russell's feedback. I don't see her here, but at some point on this.
Okay, thank you. I do see a Sandra online, so I'm gonna guess that's her. It is. There she is. She just popped up. Ms. Russell, do you have any comments before I go to Councillor Parkinson, just in regards to the motion itself?
Just that I would be happy to do some further investigation and bring a report back to council if that's what's desired. There are some considerations that would be important to run through so that we ensure we're making, good long-term decisions about our waterfront. Happy to do some more work on this if council wishes.
Okay, thank you. I will go to Councillor Parkinson.
Just going to reiterate more or less the same things that on the surface, it looks nice, but I think as we dig into it, we might realize there's more issues. I do worry about competing with our existing restaurants in town on a more permanent basis and how we could level the playing field, make it fair. So that's probably good enough for now.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands. So what I will do is call the question. Those in opposition to the motion? Nobody opposes, that motion passes. Moving on to 7.1. I guess I should go to my notes. This is a recommendation from the December 6th Committee of the Whole meeting. Councillor Logan?
I'll move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Baxter. Discussion. Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. Moving on to 7.2. This is DVP 21-015, Lot B, Allendale. This is a recommendation as well from the, the December 6th Committee of the Whole meeting. Councillor Baxter. I'm sorry, Councillor Jansen got in first. Councillor Jansen.
Just going to move the recommendation. I wasn't paying attention.
Thank you. You seconding, Councillor Baxter? Great, thank you. Discussion? Councillor Day.
Thank you. As with the previous time, council looked at this. I have not changed my mind. I won't be supporting it. I know that drive-through restaurants are very helpful to people with disabilities, and there's some good reasons for them, but I think this sets a bad precedent going from what should be 183 parking spaces down to 119. And I just think that we need to be very careful because once we say yes one place, then that becomes the de facto standard sometimes, and I am concerned.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
I have a question for staff. The recommendation says, and include the addition of 10 short-term bike slots. I just want to make sure that we're all clear that this is 10 on top of the number that was offered in the original proposal.
That's administration's understanding.
Okay, and so that will be reflected in the number in the bylaw. Thank you. And I just want to make a comment about drive-through restaurants. I've opposed drive-through for a long time, basically because of the emissions while people are sitting there. But with the rapid growth in electric cars, I can see a time down the road when there'll be no emissions from the queue at the drive-through. So drive-throughs have a future, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing for the person who's got 4 hungry kids in the car and is on a short timeline and needs to get a quick meal into them.
Thank you. Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Your Worship. And further to that, I think they've grown in popularity due to recent COVID issues. The opportunity to pick up dinners and take them home, I think, is there's been a reemergence. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I will call the question. Those in favor, please. Because I know I have an opposition, so that's why I'm doing in favor. Those in opposition, thank you. Councillor Day opposes. Moving on to 7.3. This is Yasmin Hernandez, our planner. This is in regards to RZ-02-010 3460-3461 Veterans Memorial Parkway. Ms. Hernandez.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. I don't have a presentation prepared for this evening. I will just leave the floor for the applicant. I believe they have a presentation and they would like to go over with council the reports that they've submitted and provided.
Okay, excellent. I will invite them to I'm assuming they're online, or are they here in person? They're in person. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, my name is Dean Strongatharm. I'm a land use consultant and been involved with this project for not since inception, which goes back perhaps about 2 years and has evolved over that time. But have been very much active in the last little while and very much support the project on the basis of the land use merits. With me tonight is the owners, Perry and GS Roya, as well as we have several consultants there may be questions that are asked. We have Mike Ackham from Islander Engineering, our civil engineers, Mike O'Moody, who is the designer architect, Patrick Lucy of Aquatex Environmental Research, our biologist, Brad Forth, our landscape architect, and Nadine King of Watt, our transportation engineer. On the line, again, if a question is asked, knowing that there may be from council's motion of September the 23rd, is Michael Payne, our professional hydrogeologist who wrote a report that you should have in your possession. Andrew Jackson from Risic Geotech, who is our geotech engineers that related to the motion that council adopted. Dr. Julian Dunster, who is also our biologist and basically a forestry specialist. And I'm not sure whether Graham McKenzie from Talbot McKenzie is on the line or not. He may be. Anyway, I think with that, I would also just like to echo in terms of the comments that have made prior to my presentation that, well, we perhaps members of the public do not all necessarily disagree, but in terms of the respectful comment, I certainly appreciate that and recognize that from the public. I think what I'd like to do is, I think there is a PowerPoint presentation. How do I?
Sorry, it's in front of us.
Oh, it's up there. Sorry. There it is. You can all see. I can't so I'm going to go through the initial part of it. I think I just ask, just if I may, I'm going to ask Patrick Lucy to say a few words because of the environmental importance of the project. And then I would ask the landscape architect to say a few words about the landscape, and then they'll come back to me and I'll finish it off. And so if I may, if we can go to the next slide, and I'll flip through these quite quickly. Next slide then, please. And again, these are the council, the motions or either direct or indirect that came up from the last conversation about the riparian assessment areas, about the impacts of trail improvements, and item number 3, which I think was an important one, which related to the hydrogeology and the geotech impacts of the underground parking on the wetland. And then in terms of the restoration management strategy for conservation area 2, which is actually the park and conservation area 1 is inside the development area, but right adjacent to the park. And then finally, the comparative impacts between the existing zoning, and then talking in particular on the west side of VMP and the proposed development. Next slide, please. These were the list of reports that were submitted to you, and you should have in your package. I won't go through them, but they were all accompanied the resolution or the motion that was adopted. Next slide, please. Again, as was commented earlier, this project has been going on for at least 2 years in a meaningful way. There have been changes made. As you can see on the left-hand side, there's something in the order of 14 actually scientific or technical studies that have been done. And in my experience over, I hate to say it, 50 years, I have never seen a project that has had that much study done in terms and the variety of I guess am I speaking too close or far enough away? I'm fine, okay. And the variety of studies that were done pertaining to this project. And finally, you can see the list of about 10 different consulting firms that have been involved in this project. Next slide, please. I'm going to ask Patrick to come forward. Patrick is asked to do 2 things, and he will just speak to the 2 very quickly in the next slide, but basically to look at the impact on the riparian areas, particularly as it relates to VMP and the widening of the road relative to the creek, which is on the east side, and then the riparian area on the west side. And then also there was a strong request to examine the impact of the trail systems that is being proposed within the riparian area, or at least within the extra 50 meters beyond the first 50 meters. So if you could go to the next slide, please. I'll just ask Patrick just to say a few words from the expert.
Good evening, Mayor, councillors, staff, public, and others, and elves. I'm an aquatic ecologist, and I was asked to undertake some extensive studies of the two aquatic features. Normally, I'm used to having a pointer. So on our right-hand side, east of VMP is a small stream. It's a complex of small wetlands. This stream is in very good shape, what we call proper functioning condition. We have asked, and the engineers have provided a very narrow stream crossing. My recommendation would be to put in a box culvert and keep the footprint of disturbance to the irreducible minimum. A small measure of replanting is needed in that area, but otherwise it's in very good shape. On the left-hand side, that is on the west side of the property, is a beautiful wetland. And that wetland is one of the headwaters of a stream that feeds into Latoria Creek further to the south along Latoria Road. We have looked at that wetland for many, many, many years. Most recently, as part of this development, we have recommended a very large riparian setback, 30 meters, which has been respected. Some trails will come out, they're too close to the creek or to the wetland itself. Those will be moved higher up onto the watershed side slope. We've asked that it be fenced, either with vegetation. The bigger the thorns, the better. And if not, then what we're really trying to avoid is trampling. Small kids and puppy dogs, which is where I would have lived if I was a kid. It's a great place to learn, but this is a very important amphibian breeding habitat because of the adjacent forest. So I'm sure you all know that amphibians, newts and salamanders lay their eggs in ponds. They don't like streams. And then the adults live in the forests and they complete the cycle between the two landscape units. In closing, everything that I've asked for to be protected or conserved has been done. And I think if the elements that we asked to be constructed are and are maintained, I think we can look forward to many, many decades of this landscape being in very good condition, with one caveat. And that is what the future rainfall and fire patterns look like. That's something that's increasingly difficult to model with any certainty. We've done our best to try to anticipate what that would be, but it's something we all need to be thinking about. So this last year, we had drought, fires, heat dome, and flooding. Wait till next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm clearly wrongly dressed. I should have been in my outdoor attire. Next slide, please. These were strictly excerpts from the two studies, and then also we actually asked the blaster to assess it as well, who sort of has the practical aspect of it. From a geotechnical point of view, the analysis was to look geotechnically at the rock formation and what would be the potential impact as it relates to the wetland area. Hydrologically, which was also raised, and perhaps I might let Michael Payne, who was retained, to really look at will there be an impact on the wetland as a result of the blasting caused by the underground parking, which there are 3 layers. And perhaps I've just taken the excerpt from his study, but I know if Michael is on the line, I think because of that was so important, I might just ask if Michael could just say a couple of words. Michael, are you on the line? Possibly.
Yes, I'm here. Hang on a second. Can you hear me, see me, a little bit of both perhaps?
We can hear you and see you.
Okay, very good. Yeah, just a couple of comments on my little review. Hello and good evening to the city of Callwood. Yes, my name is Michael Payne. I am a professional groundwater engineer and hydrogeologist. My company is Payne Engineering Geology. My background, very briefly, I have 2 degrees from UBC back in the 80s and 35 years of consulting experience. My report, which is dated the 5th of October, outlines my role on this project, the scope of my review, and my conclusions. And I guess just to quote the main conclusion, as is provided in this slide, my conclusion is I do not expect that the planned multifamily underground parking and associated groundwater drainage will divert a significant amount of water away from the Havenwood Park wetland, which is what I was calling that wetland on the west side of the property, which is not actually in the park, but it's adjacent to the park. I see little risk of a hydraulic connection between the existing wetland and the planned deep drainage systems. That is the drainage for the underground parking.
Okay, thank you. If we could go to the next slide, please. I would ask again very quickly for Brad Forthcombe with the landscape architect, but I would just perhaps point out at this with this slide, this doesn't show the entirety of the property. Certainly on the left-hand side as it's going up the hill, we see the wetland here, but this is an abridged version of the overall property. It is all one lot, which is split by VMP, but the area of the lot that's on the west side of VMP actually goes farther up the hill. I would also just say, again, from a comment that was made earlier, we have met with Friends of Havenwood Park, HAT, and TLC. In fact, Dr. Dunstan was there, myself, Islander Engineering, and actually Patrick Lucy, or his partner, was there. And so we did walk through the entire ecosystem, particularly around the marshland, and had a very healthy and good conversation, and kind of recognized and took into account some of the concerns that were raised. And what you see in terms of the conservation areas actually was a reflection of many parts, a reflection of the comments and feedback that we did receive. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but if you'd like to, oh, he's right here, just very quickly, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'll just not have a big preamble, but I'll just sort of address this plan that you're looking at, which we prepared the overall landscape plan for Aspen Landing. And it shows what it essentially is a project that we use environmental planning and adaptive design. And really the landscape is very important in this project. We've got consolidated footprints of buildings, which allows for compact footprints. We've put the interior amenity space for the future residents in the middle to keep it from spilling out into the outlying natural areas. And there's been a lot of discussion about the wetland and the riparian zones. And this project, because of the way we've situated the buildings, we've been able to put in a 15-meter SPIA and then an additional 15-meter offset towards our development, which will allow us to do a lot of rehabilitation plantings, understory plantings. And I think one of the important points that I want to make with this is that there's some misunderstanding about the kind of, that we're taking out all the trees and then putting in new things. But the intention here is to protect all of the significant vegetation and then enhance it with understory planting and wetland planting and environmental good works that basically will enhance our project, but also enhance the whole neighborhood. And being that we are beside a park, I think one of the major points is that this kind of development allowed us to create additional setback areas on the side yards, where I think Dean's going to get to this later when he shows you what a single family subdivision here would do. But we have these wide, ample buffer zones on the north and on the south side. And then we also proposed a series of plans that show exact detailing of how those restoration areas will be handled. And that's kind of unprecedented at this stage of a development, but I wanted to make sure that you could see how it could be achieved. And we wanted to give the planning department confidence that we could do what we said we could want to do. On the fact that the developer is willing to work with partner groups with the Friends of the Park and HAT and those groups, and also contribute funds towards rehabilitation planting. I think is a very important factor that is kind of vague. It's not really discussed, but that was the idea of us proposing planning that shows a potential jumping off point for work with these groups. And that's why we propose these restoration area plans. And then Patrick mentioned rehabilitation around the wetland itself, and part of that would mean bringing trails and rerouting things and improving the habitat overall for the site. So just wanted to give you that overview. Thanks.
Thanks, Brad. Next two slides, I'll go through really very quickly because, again, this is what Brad just mentioned about. There are 7 of these areas, just going back to the one previous one. There's 7 restoration areas. 1 and 2, 3, 4 is on the north side of the 5, 6, and 7. So there's each one of them have been quite detailed out. Conservation Area 2, I just want to point out, is that heavy line, the black line in the middle of that slide. That actually is the property line, and so that's VMP is just on the right hand side of the screen, and that's the pathway leading up into the park. And so that area there actually is within the park, where there would be restoration and rehabilitation of that element of the park. Next slide, please. And I think and then the next slide. So one of the things that was brought up at the last council meeting was also, and I recognizing we're largely looking at the west side now, because of course that perhaps has the greatest environmental footprint with marshlands in particular. And so there was discussion about what the impact is relative to what could be in the CD22 zone. And the CD22 zone on the east side allows for some commercial and housing already, which is what's being proposed. On the west side, it allowed for 21 lot subdivision. This was the application plan, which I think the planner mentioned at our September meeting, was the application that was submitted. Had not had final approval, to be specific, but it was submitted based on the CD zoning and what the subdivision plan would permit and what the CD zone would permit. And as you can see on this, that there would still be the 50-meter SPIA setback from the wetlands. But when you look at both the adjacency to Havenwood Park, which is to the bottom side of the screen, as well as to the rest Resolution Way subdivision to the north, you could see what the existing 20 lot subdivision would look like, particularly as it relates to setbacks. So if we go to the next slide, please. This is our architect, Michael Moody architect, doing best of visibility, determine what the size of a home that would likely sit on a lot, which is on your right-hand side, versus the footprint of the 2 buildings on the left-hand side. And I think done with earnest in terms of those footprints of those buildings are less than 2,000 square feet. The size of the pavement going up from Westwood is about 8.5 meters, which would be the normal width of a subdivision along here. So we tried to be as reasonably accurate as possible. But what you can see is 2 things. On the left-hand side, which is proposed development, you can see from the wetland, it is set back about 33 meters from the wetland. There's the first 15 meters and the second 50 meters, and the closest point is about 3 meters offset from that 30-meter setback from the wetland. From both Havenwood Park and also from Resolution Way, you can see that the bylaw, the C22 bylaw for the detached lots would allow for a side yard setback of 1.5 meters. So in fact, the house on the bottom bottom right-hand side, I should say, adjacent to the park, you can see where there could be a house right adjacent to the park. Both as it relates to on the left-hand side, both the southerly and the northerly setback is just over 10 meters, and in fact, on the north side, where there is a large elevation, it goes up a significant grade, and so that in fact is a 10.8 meter setback, or is about just under 35 feet. And the reason why I point that out is that the consequence of the subdivision, if you were to build something more or less like that, there would be a substantial rock removal and rock blasting right up to, or very close to at least, the northerly boundary for sure. And if we go to the next slide, please, I might add, on the left-hand side of that slide, that shows including the driveway and the parking area going to the underground parking, that has a site coverage of 34%. And on the other side, and again, I think we've been very conservative, have not included the driveways because they could be impervious, or pervious, I should say, interlocking tiles. So we didn't include the driveways in the site coverage. And so the site coverage on the right-hand side is about 48%. You could arguably make that more, but again, we were trying to be conservative in terms of the comparison. Sorry, next slide, my apologies. And this just shows, again, on the left-hand side, this is a 3D model prepared by the architect, which shows how the land rises up. And if you were putting in lots that you would have, and you see this all over the place, this is not fictitious in terms of how subdivisions can take place. And you can see, because of the rise, either at the back at Resolution Way, there would be a retaining wall, not dissimilar to retaining walls you see, well, not too far away towards Souk Road, in fact, or in Langford. So because of the difference in the elevation, this is the sort of 3D model that you would get. And then you would be looking at, say, on the right-hand side, that is just a picture of obviously the existing site and what the Resolution Way subdivision looks like currently, which was built, I think, around 2010. Next slide. We then also tried, again, this is just a second slide, just to show, and by comparison, they're both the same, but I found out the one on the left-hand side, it was hard to see. So we've just simply did it more brightly on the right-hand side. But I think it's important to say that the benefits, very hard to see, but the lime-colored green is a pedestrian walkway, which would be for the public. There's a pedestrian viewing area right on the Resolution Way subdivision. There's a pedestrian boardwalk that would cross over. There is an existing pathway that goes along the north side of the creek, which is, from an environmental point of view, is not a good thing. So you can see how we're, as soon as it was possible, to make the pathway take it away from the park to maintain the environmental integrity. And then, of course, there's the entire comprehensive restoration, or at least plant enhancement plan. If we go to the next slide. So this is the cross section that we did. This is for the Resolution Way cross section. This is assuming that on the left-hand side, you did it the way that is shown on the previous plan. So if you're doing a single-family dwelling and you didn't bring your road all the way up to the more or less the top of the hill, so you've kept the buildings down, but because you're going to be blasting, there would then have to be, without question, a large retaining wall between on the most well, in this case, northerly subdivision. As you can see, being a side yard, it only requires a 1.5 meter side yard setback to a property line if it's not facing a street, which it isn't. And so you do get a sense of the impact, and these have been done by Islander Engineering. So to the best of their abilities, using the survey points that they have, they've tried to make this as accurate as possible. The right-hand side, again, you can see the setback is it's 10.8 meters, so it's about 35 feet. You can see that you do see the 8-story building. You can see the red line, which would be the cut line in terms of the blasting. But you then see the large area that is still maintained and set back from the northerly boundary line. Included in that area, which that's Restoration Area 4. So there would be further enhancement to that area as part of the landscape plan, I should say, that Brad mentioned a bit earlier. I think if we go to the next slide, please, and I think this is just a list of the amenities. There's about 4.15 acres of land that's being dedicated to the municipality. There's an additional 3,240, so that's about 35,000 square feet for those of you like me, within those conservation areas that are in the development that would be conserved and enhanced from a vegetation point of view. There's a total of about 515 new trees. The area of restoration within Havenwood Park, which was at restoration area 2, is about 616 square meters, so it's small. That public pathway I mentioned is about 500 or 465 meters long, so 1,500 feet. And there is the pedestrian connection to at the Resolution Way right away. There is to be installed split raised fencing and a public observation deck, I should say, plus additional environmental features. Next slide, getting almost to the end very quickly, but just a summary. So there is a CAC direct cash contribution to the General Amenity Fund of $610,000, which is simply consistent with the city's policy. The estimated parkland value, and it does have a value, and it's at a very modest amount in terms of the per square foot that's allocated for that value of 2.2 million. The cost as proposed or outlined by the landscape architect for landscaping was 624,000. DCCs or DCCs, that's the number. Both the sewer and the road frontage are estimates that were provided by Islander Engineering. There are obviously other things over and above this. I didn't get into property taxes, but this gives you a sense of the cost and the contribution to the municipality. Next slide, please. I guess in closing, I believe that in terms of what the motion going back to September was, I think hopefully we've answered those. I know a couple of members of the audience spoke with respect to the OCP and with respect to density, and I'm a land use planner. I've written plans. I know that they can say all things to all people, but it's very specific that is in areas appropriate, which I think this is very appropriate for all the reasons that have just been described, that it does allow for a 1.2 FSR, specifically states that approximately 1.2 FSR, and we're at 1.21. It does allow for up to 6 stories. We are at 6 stories. And it does in terms of the use, both in terms of both the residential and so I do think that, and again, as a planner, someone mentioned Machosen, it's not in the urban containment boundary. It's not on a major artery. It doesn't have public transit. It doesn't have the infrastructure in terms of sewer and water, which this project does. And yes, it is beside Havenwood Park. And yes, one can argue that they don't want to impact Havenwood Park, but isn't that also a good reason for having some development adjacent to it, so they can also enjoy the park as well. As I say, I do a lot of developments, and I think that a 1.2 FSR is not what I would describe as high density at all. I do believe professionally that this does meet the objectives of site adaptive planning. I think that 280 rental units in an area of very high need, and I do lots of projects with BC Housing and lots of other housing projects. I just know the need, and there is a desperate need for housing generally, but there's even a higher need for rental housing. There still is less than a 1% vacancy rate, and as a consequence of that, it really is very hard for people to find places to live. And having driven out to there today, I think the more that Callwood and the Western communities can have industrial hubs here rather than having to drive downtown, I think that's good. And so having density here that can contribute to the community and also to having a kind of a hub that they can work, live, and play in the community, I think is a very good thing. And as I mentioned before, I think that it provides economic, community, and environmental benefits. And the last comment is just simply an extract from the staff report. And I believe with that, that ends the lesson. I think, I believe so. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, I'm sure. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Could you just turn that?
Yes,
there you go. Perfect. Thank you. So what I will do now is bring it back to council. Questions? Discussion. If there's no questions or discussion, I'll look for a motion. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I believe my question will be to planning, but it could be other Callwood staff who would respond. My question is, who within Callwood staff would be charged with overseeing that all the conditions that are contemplated for this development would be met and met appropriately?
I think you're up, Ms. Hernandez.
I will, I saw Carrie also had her hand up, so she may want to supplement my response. So I know through the staff report, we've outlined the number of processes and permits and the supervision that will be required on this application. It comes both from the province as well as the municipality as it involves riparian areas. And as part of the environmental development permit, there will be a requirement for environmental monthly monitoring, and it would be done by a consultant, a registered consultant that will provide monthly reports to city staff regarding groundwater, sediment control, and a number of other elements. So it does get captured in an environmental development permit with very specific monthly requirements. This is the same process that we have used to monitor the development of Olympic View and how we check periodically. We do go on site regularly. It is a collaboration among staff, building inspectors. We're always routinely going on site to active sites. And we're all aware internally within city staff to keep an eye on the various elements of concern.
So I don't believe the province generally has anyone who monitors construction sites within Callwood.
So I didn't mean that they would be monitoring, but they will establish requirements to meet the conditions of their established guidelines. And it is the qualified environmental professional who is responsible to report to the province any violations to the provincial expectation.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't know where council's going on this. Just a few questions though before we get into the meat of it. Good work, by the way. I think certainly on the hydrogeology and geotechnical, I think that certainly 100% satisfied my concerns. The restoration work you can see is first class, excellent. I did hear the words environmental importance, landscape very important. So those are very key parts of the project. I just wonder, probably if this is for Ms. Hernandez, a lot of this stuff that we've talked about here tonight that's been presented by the applicant and that's of concern to council will eventually get wrapped up into the development agreement, which as I understand it, won't be coming back to council. If council passes the zoning, then we pass it over to staff to basically write and enforce the development agreement. You know, there's some stuff in here I noticed on the environmental side where essentially what they're saying when we ask about riparian, they're saying, well, that's, you know, we have to apply for this permit from what do they call it? WSA section 11, other permits that needed to be applied for, which I guess makes sense. If you don't have a real project, you don't apply for the permit. But if they come back saying different things, at what point does the staff make adjustments to the development permit? At what point are changes considered pertinent enough to bring it back to council? I wonder if you could give me some guidance on that, Ms. Hernandez.
So in terms of, I guess the development agreement will outline the conditions, and the general themes of the development agreement have been put in the initial staff report and the subsequent report. And in terms of how will changes to the proposal be handled? I think there's a few steps that council will still have an ultimate involvement in the last say on. One primarily being that conservation plan for the Havenwood edges and the Havenwood Park element. And so that plan and that detailed proposal will need to come back to council for review and approval. And in terms of the environmental development permit, we will be holding the applicant closely to the expectation that the public and council has developed in terms of those conservation areas, the intent and the objective. An amendment to an environmental development permit, it is generally handled by staff. It's an administrative task. So maybe I'll ask my manager, Carrie Clark, to elaborate as to when and how it may be appropriate to delineate times for council to be involved in that step if it's so.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to just supplement Jasmine's feedback to answer Councillor Parkinson's question. And for starters, we will, as Jasmine had mentioned, we have outlined all of the conditions to be included in a development agreement. What we focused on was the timeline of when these items would be required. So as Jasmine mentioned, we will, within 6 months of adopting the zoning bylaw, it would be expected that the applicant will work with staff to bring back a park plan for approval. And this would address all of the park improvements in Havenwood Park proposed by the developer. So there will be another opportunity for council to consider this. The other items that Jasmine had mentioned tonight is, in fact, as she mentioned, will be included within a development permit application, which will need to meet the conditions of the OCP design guidelines. And if there is other questions about this, I'm happy to answer this. Thank you.
I guess I'm still not really clear on just how big of a change, I mean, there may be no changes from these permits that are going to be applied for. Maybe they're absolutely routine and what you ask for is what you get. It just, obviously a key part of this site is the environmental restoration that's been proposed. And then what they're proposing is I think it's first class, but it may be that that's not what people want at the end of the day. And therefore there are some changes. That's a concern. But if you're saying that would be a staff decision at that point, and maybe that's the appropriate. So if that's your answer, okay, go ahead.
Maybe I'll just clarify through the chair. I would just like to clarify that it is unlikely for significant changes. We would, at this point, the developer has brought forward several very detailed reports, and the expectation from staff would be, in order to realize this development and meet the conditions of the development agreement, that the proposal would be significantly very similar. If there are changes, such as to the items within the development agreement, this would need to be brought back to council for consideration.
Thank you. Thank you. That certainly satisfies me on that point. And then again, I'm not sure who this could go to, maybe staff, maybe to Dean. We heard from a lot of the public tonight about perhaps there's a compromise here, or perhaps a compromise would be better. You know, I'm not going to come out too critical of the comparison of the 21 single family lots to the apartment complex, but you know what you're suggesting there is the 21 single family lots would be constructed without the same level of care and commitment to the environment that's being proposed on the apartment. So you know, that's frankly probably realistic, but it's not necessarily apples to apples. The cross section you showed of the apartment building adjacent to the homes. And that's a little striking. That's a little significant for the existing homes. So I'm wondering what discussions, if any, have been taken place on a compromise that might be more palatable to the neighbors and may achieve some of what the developer's trying to do.
Through the chair. Well, I think actually, as had been stated earlier, actually, there have been changes to the plan since it was initially introduced, and particularly as it relates to the design has changed substantially. Both, we haven't got into the design, and that will be something downstream. But this very interesting curvy linear building, which has been brought in from its edges and brought back significantly from the wetland. So there have been significant changes, in my view, to actually try to incorporate what is described as site adaptive planning. I guess to your one point saying, well, why didn't you compromise further? And I guess that being a land use planner, I'd say is because the OCP as it currently is written permits it. So if you want to change the OCP, that's fine. I guess we'd have to do it. But my view would be is that the FSR, the floor space, the height, and obviously the use is as and has been stated also by the planning department, notwithstanding members of the public saying otherwise. And I guess the other thing with the 21 lot subdivision, which I think is very important, is it would not require rezoning. You would not get the chance for the CACs. There's a whole bunch of things that, because we are applying for a rezoning, that staff and council get to consider and hopefully benefit further the community than if we simply, or the owner simply applied for a 21 lot subdivision. So you are gaining significant amenities and benefits, in my opinion, that only is achieved if rezoning occurred.
Well, there you go again, being sort of it's the apartment building versus like these ugly 21 lots. Was there?
Sorry, my apologies. I turned you off by accident.
I thought with
How about that? Can you hear me? Okay.
I can hear you now. Thank you.
People can hear online, but they can't hear in the room. And I don't think when I threw Stewart out, sorry, Councillor Parkinson, that seems to when I messed everything up. Could I? Is there anything I can do? Michael, try turn. Let's drop you off, Michael. Go ahead, turn it off.
Testing. Mine works. Testing. There you go.
Test, test, test.
Testing. Yep, it's working.
It's good on my end as well.
Is that correct?
Test, test.
All right.
Yeah, it's good.
Weird.
All right, I'll go find everybody. Sorry.
Marcy. I'm going to ask everybody to come back together for me, please. All right, thank you, everybody. Marcy's just checking sound. Yeah, that's it. Okay, we can focus on that later. So I'm going to bring us back to, we are still on, wait, yeah, now I've got, we're going to live with it, everybody. We're going to go with, we're still presently on 7.3. We're in questions right now. I'm not seeing that I have any more questions from anyone. So, boy, that is, yeah, that is. Okay, sure. Okay, I will. I'll go like this. How's that? So we are still. Okay, I will keep going. I will. I don't see that we have any more questions. So thank you. That sounds better. So I will look to a motion or comments or where we're at. Councillor Logan. So excuse me.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Baxter. Do you have any discussion? Okay, then I will go to Councillor Baxter. Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, as I started to say before I blew the mics or something, it's good to see so many people out here active about their community, and I even like the signs. But the really sad thing is that nobody came out when the first rezoning was done, because that's when the damage was done. This property was originally had a zoning on it that I think only would have permitted one house to be built somewhere on the property, and it was rezoned as single family, and there wasn't a single voice against it. Had there been this level of opposition at that point, something different might have happened. As I say, I think that rezoning was a very sad thing, but now we're stuck with it. We can't go backwards because the developer has already provided things and spent money as part of what you might refer to as the deal to develop the overall site. And if we try and undo this single family rezoning, there'll be lawsuits, as other municipalities have found out to their cost. So it either has to be single family or it has to be some form of multifamily. And I've worked in municipal work for decades, and I've seen a lot of single family subdivisions done, and mostly for the entire area that is allowed to be developed, everything is just wiped out, particularly where the ground has difficult contours, as this area does. And for me, the decision, first of all, it's not about the personality of the developer. Rezoning is about land use way into the future. The person applying may be the worst person in the world, or they may be the best person in the world, but they're not necessarily the person who's going to build it, let alone they have any bearing on who's going to live there 50 years from now. So council has to think about what zoning is best for the community, the entire community, not the community that lives next door. Not only that community, but the entire community. And the way I look at it is we've asked a lot of tough questions. We've got a lot of really, really good professional answers in these reports. And I don't think there's any question that the on the west side in particular, we end up with more park. If we go to the proposal, then if we stick with the existing zoning and and I think the environmental impact overall is better with the smaller building footprint. And I know that's not going to be popular, but I'm not here to make popular decisions, but to make decisions that I think are right. And I think in this case, this is right. And I have seen this happen before, where neighborhoods oppose the higher density in terms of type of housing. And I've seen them where the higher density has been rejected and the single family has been built, and it's absolutely destroyed the area where the single family is built. So I will be voting for the motion for that reason and that reason alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jansen.
Sounds awful.
That sounded awful.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So
I think that's good enough.
thank you, Councillor Baxter, for some sage commentary from someone who's been in the business a long time. And I recognize Councillor Parkinson and his experience in this regard, something that I lack. When I'm left with a decision here, and if my sole concern is the park and adding to the park and creating more park space for our community, then again, this decision becomes more clear. When we get into, and I think the part I find instructive is that I didn't really hear any of the neighbors indicate that this was an outright no, and no to development. It was some concerns about the density, which I too live in the neighborhood, not very far away, and there's some densification going in even closer to my home. And unfortunately, this is a new reality for the economy and for our community and for our young people to have a place to live, of which I have two that will be launching hopefully sooner rather than later, and they'll need a place to stay. So I do have some questions, and they're not really in any particular order other than I wrote them down as they came to my mind. I would love to know more about the original zoning. I think this may be for Yasmin or Carrie, that the original 21 family home zoning that predates the current iteration of our OCP. Does that zoning stand, or would that have to come back to staff to be rehashed as far as our site adaptive principles? I'd love some clarity on that, because there does seem to be concerns that the entire property would be raised and blasted to facilitate those 21 homes.
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Councillor Jansen. It is a very good question. If the applicant wishes to pursue with a 21 lot subdivision, it would be a subdivision application. It would not come back to council relative to the proposal itself. However, staff would be looking to ensure that site adaptive planning is met through the subdivision proposal. And so it would not come back to council.
Okay, thank you. And I'm not so fussed about whether it comes back to me or not, or us, but just that we would be insisting there would be some adherence to our current OCP, because that zoning predates the current OCP. Is that accurate?
For single family dwellings, it is permitted under the OCP for hillside development. So it would be in alignment with the OCP. Staff would encourage the applicant to implement site adaptive planning.
Okay, thank you. So I feel like it's a zero-sum game. It's either slash and burn and blow the hillside up and build 21 homes, or this lovely development that's been presented to us in the best possible light. So I feel like my back's against the wall a little bit in some regard. I recognize that there has been some flexibility shown by the proponent in the design. We have heard that the community isn't opposed to development, but there's some concerns about the FAR and the level of density, which there really hasn't been any discussions about compromise. Yes, I understand, Mr. Strongatharm, specifically that our OCP does say up to 6 stories, but it feels like, again, it's like 6 stories are nothing, 21 houses are nothing. It's like, and we're left with trying to make a decision that is in the best possible, that is the best possible decision for our entire community. And I struggle a little bit with this being sort of an all or nothing campaign. This is a question for this may be a question for the development team, but or staff. As far as the rentals go, will the proponent be entering into a covenant as far as rentals for a certain duration? I haven't heard that come up at all, but we have discussed that in previous rental developments.
I will take that question. So through the chair, thank you, Councillor Jansen. At this time, our land use bylaw does not differentiate between rental apartment or condo ownership. So this is the question I will defer to the applicant. Perhaps Dean can speak to this question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strongatharm, and I sorry to put you on the spot. But
it's okay. I may not be able to totally answer the question. So we've indicated it would be rental, and I think the question is, would we enter into a housing agreement for X number of years that would be rental? And the answer would be yes, but I can't at this stage. I don't want to. I can't commit to what that is.
And I'm
very
apologize.
clear.
That might be random, but some developers choose to come forward and say enter into a section 219 covenant that they will remain rental for a defined duration.
Correct.
So it is in a rental building for 6 months and then it gets sold off as condos. I guess some assurance for the community that it is what is being proposed.
Yeah, so either a 219 covenant or a housing agreement, which is different section of the Local Government Act. It's a registered document. Like you're obliged to meet the terms of that, or you can be, taken to court and fined.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so it's a registered document on title.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And does it have a defined duration? Sorry, Dean.
Yes, I've done housing agreements for rental from minimum, I guess, is from 10 years to 60.
That's great. Great name, by the way.
My last name? Thank you. But I noticed there's Mr. Claus beside you.
Thank you so much. We've heard from the community too about some of the zoning, some of the OCP, and as I've come to learn that it feels to me like the OCP really, it's almost, I hate to draw the metaphor, but I will a little bit. It's almost like, you can find passages in the OCP to support just about anything or to oppose just about anything. So how am I left to extrapolate that when, a proponent comes forward and says it meets our OCP and here's all the sections, and the community comes forward and says, well, it doesn't in all these sections, and our staff comes forward and says it does in these particular sections. I'll tell you, I'm a bit, maybe a bit simple in this regard as far as development goes, but I find that a little bit frustrating that you can't, it's almost like, throwing Jello at the wall and seeing what sticks, for goodness sakes. But I do believe that this meets with the spirit of certainly what the OCP is trying to achieve. I was a participant in some of the OCP discussions back in I guess 2017 or so, and our OCP is fairly new, and it will get touched up in the next couple of years. So in the end, you know, I'm left with taking a decision which I feel might be the best. You know, as far as the park goes, I do have some concerns about the park, but yet our parks master plan, which is being done right now, the park experts are telling us that you build density next to a park because that allows people that might be of lesser means or living in a densified development. It affords them the ability to go out and seek the relief from the everyday stressors in the park that is adjacent there, immediately adjacent their community. So again, how do I extrapolate that? So one expert's telling us we put density in next to a park. Other people say, you know, we should put the density elsewhere. So it's a tough one, but in the end, I feel that there's enough here to move this along for me. I do understand that this is the beginning of the process. This is not the end of the process. So there are more checks and balances to come. And I may reflect on that decision based on some stuff that comes forward in the future. But I've rattled on enough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you. So I hope you'll forgive me. I tried to be brief earlier. I know we have a long meeting, but there's some important stuff here at stake. I ran for council to help to represent the residents. That's what I'm here to do. That's the only thing I'm here to do. I'm not here to build my vision of Callwood. I'm here to make sure that democracy works. I moved here in the 80s. And back then, guess what the vacancy rate was? 1%. And it's still, it doesn't matter how fast you build. It doesn't seem to matter how many things you build. People love this place. I love this place. Everyone who's here tonight loves this place. And we're all coming here and trying to enjoy living here. And I want more people to come here. But when they come here, I want them to find the plants and the animals that I found when I came here. So yes, I do know. I know exactly what has happened with this property. I was part of the Green Spaces working group that documented this place first in Callwood, 1999. And I've been working to share that with my cubs and my beavers, some of whom are now on our fire department. So it's been a long go, but it's the same issues. And we still need to be very careful not to love our park to death. We tried really hard to make sure that there was a conservation covenant that spoke to the plants and animals and the beautiful earth and the things that it provides to us would be there for the next generations to come. And then it was sold. And it was rezoned. And I thought that was the worst day of my life. But I have to correct a couple things I heard here tonight. I heard tonight that nobody came out and said anything when it was rezoned. Not true. Habitat Acquisition Trust presented a report to council with a full disclosure of the massive impacts the development of this site would have on the park itself. Not on the development site, but on the park. My concerns are with the number of people who are going to treat that park like their backyard. My concerns are also that people need to be heard and that the city needs to be responsive to the concerns that they bring forward. And what I've heard over and over again is that there hasn't been a compromise. And I do appreciate the very professional reports. And I do appreciate that residents are worried about affordable housing as they were back in the early 80s when we were discussing in these same chambers different developments that were coming forward, and affordable housing was a big deal. We've made some strides. More needs to be done. But most important for me, I can't recreate that park. I can't even begin to promise you that we could get a new park anywhere like it. A lot of miracles have happened to allow that park to exist. Wolfgang Gulick, who lived nearby, took different members of different viewpoints out, some pro-development, some staunchly anti-development. He took them all out separately and stood in the middle of that forest and said, don't you just feel better here? And they did. And so everybody came together to protect that park. So I'm concerned that nothing has been offered to support the park. Yes, we're protecting that wetland. The east side, I think, has been rather orphaned by this process. It's been overshadowed by what's happening with the wetland on the west side, and that's very important. And I really appreciate the efforts that Aquatex and Mr. Lucy have made for as long as I've been here and longer to promote environmental diversity and aquatic health for this region. But there's creeks on both sides of VMP. They all run downhill into the Latoria area, and it's all at risk. So I cannot in good conscience support 500 or 600 residents living right next door to the one thing that we've been able to save in 35 years. I just can't. And even if 21 single-family homes would devastate that portion of the land, which I certainly hope that they wouldn't, and staff tell me that they would have to follow the OCP guidelines and do site adaptive planning. I would still prefer that, not because it would be a better outcome, but because at least it wouldn't be the beginning of the slippery slope that simply erodes what has been a wonderful place for people to take refuge. There has been no compromise, and it doesn't matter who brings this proposal forward. I don't care if you have a wonderful reputation or a terrible reputation. I have to treat you the same. That's my job. This is democracy. So I guess to sum it up, it breaks my heart, really does. Whether or not we have a 1% vacancy rate or 2% vacancy rate or a 4% vacancy rate, people will have issues, people will have problems, they will need help, and we will all be there to help solve those problems. That's what community does. We won't do it as well without a beautiful park to be the center of Callwood. Thanks.
Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Worship. Just perhaps to echo the words of Councillor Jansen on the OCP. After 3 years on council, I don't think we've had a project that hasn't had people on both sides saying we have to go one way or the other exactly because of what the OCP says. It says a lot of things. It's an aspirational document. So I do try to understand the OCP and follow it, but I believe what I'm really here trying to do is make the best possible community for the city for now and in the future. So I reject completely the argument that we have to approve this because otherwise it will become 21 single-family lots and the place will be destroyed. Maybe it will. Councillor Day made some good points about if it does, but that's not what I'm hearing from the community or believing would be the next best choice for the landowner. I did hear the community speak of compromise. I do think that the 3 stories of underground parking and 6 stories is a lot on the west side of VMP. So I can't support the motion the way it is today. I'm sorry.
Councillor Logan. Thank you, Worship. Very good arguments, I think, on both sides, for sure. And I will say the original plan, I think the community had some good cause to be concerned, and I recognize that that there have been some changes, and I've been around long enough that I recognize some of the pros and cons of each plan, and I've been around long enough to recognize when council has turned down a project and it's come back to bite us because the proposed project, notwithstanding some of the changes that have been requested, was actually better than what was permitted under the existing zoning. I'm not a geotechnical engineer or a professional planner by any means, more of a policymaker like we all are. And a good policy, as I've learned over the years, dictates that density be located near major roads. This is exactly what's envisioned within the OCP. And I do agree with my colleague about representing our residents, all residents, but we ought to have some vision too, and have some guts to be able to look past today and look to tomorrow, 5, 10, 15 years down the road. This is not a today or tomorrow decision. This is a decision that will impact the community for years to come. In my mind, a good way. There is a housing need. Listen to the radio. Listen to the commentary out there. There is a housing need, affordable housing for sure, but just the general housing need. That's not a secret. And I did hear tonight that council receives biased staff reports, and that struck me poorly, I think, initially. And then when I analyzed it, I thought, yeah, you're damn right we receive biased staff reports. They're biased towards the OCP, land use policies, bylaws. And so the reports that we're receiving from staff are based on professional experience in their fields. And I trust that professional experience, and I trust our staff that when they say that a particular project fits within the OCP, damn it, I'm not a planner, and I will trust our professional planner until the end of time. So I appreciate their advice here. And I guess, it's convenient. We hold up our OCP when it's convenient, when we want to spread a particular message. As in, we need to protect this, that, and the other thing. We don't hold it up when it says we can develop up to 6 stories because it's not convenient to our narrative. And I'm saying if the OCP says that we can build up to 6 stories on that piece of property, then people expect that we live up to the obligation that the OCP sets out. And that's where I'm coming from here, is that I'm hearing that 6 stories is appropriate on this site. The OCP permits it based on the advice that is given by our professional staff, and I respect that. And I think that's an expectation that everybody should have if it's in the OCP. We can't hold it up based on our convenience. And so I recognize that this is a change, but I also recognize the opportunity for Havenwood Park. There is a significant benefits and addition to Havenwood Park, and I think I'm the only one on council actually that was involved in the acquisition of 40 acres of Havenwood Park when the VMP was constructed. And so I understand and value that park until the day I die, frankly. And I see an opportunity here to really add greatly. And I'm not convinced that having additional neighbors is going to decimate that park, frankly. I walk that park on a regular basis, and 9 times out of 10, I don't run into one soul, not one damn soul. And so, you know, it hasn't been proven that it's going to be decimated as a result of this project next door. And in fact, it's going to be added to. So there are pluses and minuses for sure. And I think for me, there are more check boxes checked on the positive side than there are on the negative side. And so I recognize that this is still early on in the process. And so I will be supporting its advancement until I am convinced otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Saying before I call the vote, I will just express how I'm feeling and my belief set. I hear what the public's saying, and I hear the public's concern about the about the park. And if it's about ensuring that the park is safe, it's something that's important to me as well. The park needs to be safe and it needs to thrive. Do I believe? But I also have, I also struggle because one of the largest communication structures that I get through emails and from people in this community is talking about affordability. And it's about how do I have my children be able to stay here in Callwood? And fact of the matter is, as we continue to move forward, we're seeing escalations in single family home prices, which are pricing young people out of our community. You can look at places like North Saanich. North Saanich right now is going through a major OCP, and they're going through a major fight with their community because there's one set that recognizes that it's unaffordable to live in North Saanich unless you're affluent. And I have a real desire for us to live in a community where people can have different socioeconomic classes and still be able to be here in Callwood. And that's when I look at it, I am building and I represent not only today's voters, but the people who are going to be moving to our community as well, and ensuring that we have places for those people to live. I want this park to be successful, but I also believe that it can be successful by having people live beside it. There's all sorts of density that has been built by me on the lagoon, and I see it in Pacific Landing. I see it at Quattro or Two Waters or whatever we're calling it this week. And I've seen a change in my single family neighborhood, but I haven't seen it for the bad. I see more people walking down my street. I see more contacts, but I embrace people. I embrace that we have people living in our community. And I want to make sure that we have projects that are able to be single family homes, projects that are townhouses that lower that cost. And then also rentals. The fact of the matter is there is a significant population out here who will never have the money for a down payment. They will never find that 10, 20%. And so we're going to need to provide rental stock to people if we wish for those people to live here. Is the number perfect? I'm not sure. And I think as we progress down this, as we go into a public hearing, as we get more input from the community, we're going to hear those numbers and we're going to be able to adjust it so that it fits. But I am strongly supportive of especially densification on Veterans Memorial Parkway. If you're not going to build density on busy roads, I'm not sure where we're going to build density. So for those reasons, I will be supporting moving this forward tonight. Saying that, I will then now look to call the question. I'm going to do both in favor and in opposition so that it's recorded. Those in support, please raise your hand. And those in opposition. Please note that Councillor Parkinson and Councillor Day opposed. Moving on to 7.4, which is Ian Borhill, our Director of Community Planning, draft Callwood Waterfront Stewardship Plan. Mr. Borhill. And you know what? We'll give everybody a minute, Mr. Borhill, if people want to leave.
Check, check. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I've just got a brief introduction before welcoming our consultant, Paul DeGrief. On behalf of the entire project team, I have to say it's an honor to present to Council the first full draft of the Waterfront Stewardship Plan. This draft represents a culmination of years worth of work done by dozens of community members, stakeholders, various other jurisdictions, our multidisciplinary consulting team, city staff, the Waterfront Coastal Process Committee, and Council. Our lead consultant and landscape architect, Paul DeGrief, will be presenting the latest phase of the project that resulted in the draft plan and diving into it in more detail. Before this, I'd like to outline the recommendations from staff and the Waterfront Committee. Council now has an opportunity to advance the draft Waterfront Stewardship Plan to a third round of public engagement focused on collecting commentary on the draft plan. Staff are recommending that this takes place in December and January before a final draft comes back to Council for consideration in February of 2022. Also, at their meeting held on November 25th, 2021, the Waterfront Coastal Process Committee recommended that a bridge connecting the multi-use pathway and Pit House Park, which is now proposed to be redesignated as Lagoon West Park, be added to the draft plan.
I'm just going to interrupt you just for a moment, Mr. Borhill. Would you mind shutting the door? Thank you.
So the bridge, which was called, it oscillated between Hope Bridge and Peace Bridge. It was a placeholder name. Was presented in the summer as one of the concepts for the waterfront. It didn't end up in the final plan based on feedback from the public that included concerns regarding its potential impact to the bird habitat at the Esquimalt Lagoon Migratory Bird Sanctuary. If council wishes to include the bridge in the draft plan as recommended by the Waterfront Committee, staff submit that this change could be incorporated into the draft such that it could still be released for public comment in December and January. With that, I would now ask that Mr. DeGrief be provided an opportunity to make his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's great to be here with you in person. And thank you, Mayor Martin, for your address earlier. And I'd just like to return the sentiments and wish you all a joyous festive season. And thank you to Councillor Logan for the visible demonstration. I was trying to decide if the flashing was matching your heart rate, and then I thought that we. Very good. So I'd like to work through a fairly brief presentation on just summarizing where we're at with the Waterfront Stewardship Plan. We have prepared a draft plan now. And if you could advance to the next slide. Oh, it's not. Oh, okay. So if I say advance, it'll, excellent. Look at that. Wow, this is great. So I'll work through the remaining portions of the project, the remaining timeline, give you a sense of when we expect to wrap up, provided council endorses the plan, and then speak to what I think of as sort of the key outcomes for the project. And then I'll work through a very brief summary and speak a little bit about the implementation strategy for the plan. So next slide, please. So very quickly, I'd just like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish. I would also like to acknowledge that I was in another room in the building, but I did hear a speaker speak to the Hope Bridge. So, so that is in the back of my mind as well as we're working through this presentation. So next slide, please. This is a diagram that I've presented previously, and it was really just illustrating the inputs to the conceptual design process and the iterative process, the sort of iterative design process that we engaged in, where we were looking at going to the community, engaging with the community, using that input to influence the conceptual designs, and then revising the designs and going back to the community for input again. So that has happened twice now. We're now at the stage where we'd like to advance this to a final plan. Next slide, please. So in terms of the remaining timeline, assuming that council endorses the plan today, we would move to a third round of engagement that we would close mid-January. We would, during that time, we would refine and update the plan, use the public feedback to further refine it, and then bring it back to council sometime, hopefully in February. Next slide, please. So in terms of the outcomes, our team thinks of this plan as modest but exciting, as innovative but efficient, and is responsive. So I'll just work through a series of slides here that speak to each of these. Next slide, please. So in terms of innovation, as far as I know, this will be the first Green Shores Ready community plan in BC, and I think that that's really exciting. I'm one of a handful of Green Shores accredited professionals in the province right now, and this is a program that we're very much promoting and hoping receives more broad adoption, and really it centers on these principles, these 4 principles of preserving and enhancing environmental quality. Next slide, please. The project includes significant ecological restorations, including salt marsh, dune, and riparian restorations. And these ecological enhancements are tied closely to the amenities that are proposed, and they work together. And I'll speak to that in a little bit more detail. Next slide, please. These are just a few images that show how trails and restorations can work together in coastal environments. Just one really brief note on these images. Sometimes it's hard to find just the right image, but I don't envision needing to use long lengths of fencing to control people's movements, but certainly fencing to some degree does help to protect ecological enhancements in these kinds of public environments. So next slide, please. This plan has resiliency built into it. We are talking about building in a dynamic, energetic environment, and things like the dune restoration that we're proposing help to protect the amenities that we're proposing behind them. Raised walkways are resilient in the face of rising sea levels. It's also set back far enough from the shoreline to be resilient to fluctuations in the shoreline. And even the materials that we're selecting are starting to consider long-term resiliency. Next slide, please. I like to think of this plan as site adaptive planning in action. This is a plan that started with a very detailed analysis of site conditions, and all the way through has been responding to what we learned at the outset. So by its nature, it's a site adapted plan. Next slide, please. Safety and accessibility, just one thing to note is when we met with the RCMP in the summertime, they identified Ocean Boulevard along Cobourg Peninsula as the roadway that generates the most traffic-related complaints in the West Shore. So they were very much advocating for traffic calming measures. We have proposed at a conceptual level traffic calming measures along Cobourg Peninsula, and those are the kinds of things that we get fleshed out in more detail through a detailed design process. But certainly traffic calming, safety, and universal accessibility have been considered throughout the development of the plan. Next slide, please. The continuous waterfront pathway integrated into the plan as the sort of core defining element of the plan. Currently the plan is designed from the northern edge of Royal Beach all the way up to the bridge at the north end of Cobourg Peninsula. Next slide, please. So I also like to think of this plan as being very responsive to existing policy. I've mentioned the OCP goal of site adaptive planning, but also the Parks and Rec Master Plan, which was a very helpful guide in developing the waterfront stewardship plan. And of course, our engagement process throughout the development of this plan has allowed us opportunity to test with the community responses to concepts. And ongoing First Nations engagement that Mayor Martin had the opportunity to participate in our last round of. So it was great to have him participate in those conversations as well. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the continuous waterfront walkway or pathway as the defining element of the plan. And I'd like to start by summarizing the plan with just mentioning a few elements about the waterfront pathway. We do anticipate that it would have varied surface materials, everything from concrete in the Millburn area to gravel on Cobourg Peninsula. And again, the variation in material is adapting to site conditions, to energy regimes in those different areas. We see it as a shared pathway for bikes and pedestrians. And again, universal accessibility design throughout. Next slide, please. The waterfront stewardship plan is divided into 6 sub-areas that are phased, starting with the South Beach area from Lagoon Road heading northward along Cobourg Peninsula, then the middle section at the Riflery Berm crossing, and then the north section at Cobourg Peninsula. And then we jump down to the Millburn section just south of Lagoon Road, hop over to the Lagoon West Park. And I'll just briefly mention that formerly known as Pitt House Park, we sort of gave it this generic as we could possibly think of name as a placeholder. And that was actually an acknowledgement to some comments that the Songhees Nation made during our conversation with them. They have an interest in working with Callwood through a renaming process for that park in particular. So it sounds a bit clunky, but bear with us. So, and then, yes, and then the last section would be the boardwalk section from the southern tip of Ocean Boulevard down to the northern edge of Royal Beach. Each sub-area plan has background and rationale that's provided in the report. The design elements are described in detail and illustrated. There's some general specifications that speak to materials, the scale of facilities, that sort of thing. And then some costing is provided for each of those phased areas as well. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go into detail on each of these, other than to just reiterate that, in fact, you could advance through all 6 sub-area plans. I think there's 6 slides here. So you could go forward 6 slides. So this slide here just speaks to the WCPC, the Waterfront Coastal Processes Committee recommended inclusion. The Hope Bridge was removed from the draft plan as it was presented to the Waterfront Coastal Processes Committee. During the last meeting of the committee, they put forward a motion to reinstate the Hope Bridge. I particularly liked the idea. However, it was removed as a result of community input. So that is I guess a second consideration for council to consider. Next slide, please. Yeah, I'm just going to wrap up my presentation by just speaking to a few of the costing considerations when you are looking at the costing, and then very briefly touch on implementation of the plan. So when you look at the costing, it's important to note that the costs are specific to open space elements. So the pathway, the restoration elements, reconfiguration of parking, accessibility improvements, those kinds of things. The dune restoration and riparian restoration I've listed in particular, they are pretty big ticket items, but if they're just thought of as restorations alone, it might seem out of place, but they double as resiliency tools. So I think that's an important consideration when looking at the costing. The raised walkway for A6, Area 6 at Perimeter Park, a detailed cost estimate was developed by our engineering consultant for that element. We felt it was important enough to do that. However, some of the other structures in the plan, so covered picnic shelters and other kinds of sort of bigger ticket items, we didn't develop architectural plans for them, so we didn't really have anything to cost per se. So we provided lump sum estimates for those structures. Next slide, please. In terms of next steps, there's 15 policy actions that are recommended as part of the plan. They range from developing First Nations engagement frameworks and protocols to pursuing partnerships to, for example, a bylaw regulatory review to ensure consistency with the federal migratory bird sanctuary regulation as it applies to Esquimalt Lagoon. Next slide, please. But the number one recommendation that we have in the report is to pursue a beach sediment management strategy. And that work has already begun with the Waterfront Coastal Processes Committee. We had a workshop last week looking specifically at this issue. Next slide, please. So just to wrap up then, the real meat of the waterfront stewardship plan is the construction and implementation phase, which would include development of detailed sub-area plans, refining capital and maintenance costs for consideration, and that would also provide opportunity for pursuing partnerships for specific portions of the plan, permit applications with regulators, and then awarding of construction contracts. So thank you very much, and I'm more than happy to work with Ian to answer questions.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I am quite concerned with the bridge structure, and I am not up on your latest version of bringing it back, full disclosure, but it's interesting to me. There's been quite a good go at this with the committee with lots of professional help. And probably 20 years ago when I started in politics, this was I was the chair of Parks and Rec at the time, and this was one of the things that the community wanted to talk about, was what was our plans for Esquimalt Lagoon. So we've ended up much at the same place that the community and I ended up at 20 years ago, which is a plan for a raised walkway along parts of the lagoon and a multi-use path. And the consideration then as now was how the heck are we going to afford to do all this extra work, because it is a intensive program. I'm very pleased to see the universal access in everything that you have proposed. But there's very little recognition has been given to the work that has already been put in to the accessible art space, which is where the degaussing hut area is. And that was, we're talking about the days when $15,000 in the city budget was a large amount of money. That was my entire year's worth of trail upgrades that I could do, was 15,000. And so eventually money does find its way into programs that are worthwhile. So I am sure that we will find a way to resource the things that the community needs. But I would be opposed to the idea of the bridge for a number of reasons, but specifically because of the wildlife. And it seems almost as if we're turning an incredible natural asset almost into a midway at times. We've got the rock climbing wall and the music's playing, and it is a wonderful event for humans, but it does also come at a cost to our animals. And so I want to be very respectful of that the places where the animals know nobody's going to get to them, nobody does get to them there, so that they can continue to thrive and delight us with their seasonal appearances or round the year visitations that they do to our migratory bird sanctuary. So I thank you for all of that. My questions are really around how do we ensure, like, where do we decide where to start? Because obviously it's not going to happen in a short time frame. So is there a implementation plan?
Thank you, Councillor Day, for that question. I'll start off, and I think Mr. DeGrief could elaborate. So we're proposing, as part of the budget process, a sufficient funds that we'd be able to do scoping design of phase 1 of the proposed plan. So if council wanted to go ahead and adopt the plan, we would be able to hit the ground running in 2021. And I'll just ask if Mr. DeGrief could speak to the implementation plan in more detail.
So the Waterfront Stewardship Plan draft report does include implementation recommendations, and the first phase of implementation is recommended to consist of the area that we've labeled as South Beach. So it would be from Lagoon Road in the range of about 700 meters northward from Lagoon Road along the peninsula. So it would be the first section of a pathway, a waterfront pathway that would be developed along with dune restoration on the east side of Lagoon Road, east side of Ocean Boulevard, and then riparian restoration on the west side. So that's the first phase proper in the plan. As part of our WCPC meeting discussion workshop last week, some very good questions were raised around how the shoreline is managed long-term, how it is protected, and how the protection of the shoreline facilitates the improvements and protects the improvements. So I think that there is some work to be done by committee and by staff to think about how a sediment management plan might preface the actual implementation of phase 1 per se. So I think that's a conversation that is still ongoing.
Thank you.
Sorry. Councillor Baxter. No, I shifted twice, sorry.
Oh, thank you. I'll take that.
Okay, as Mr. Grief alluded to, these two processes, one where we look at the waterfront plan that's just been presented, and the other one where we're looking at what's the potential for change on the peninsula and how do we deal with that, are slightly in echelon right now rather than coming truly together. And as Mr. DeGrief said, we don't actually know precisely how we're going to attack protecting the facilities we're going to build, nor what that's going to cost. So my question to council is, at this stage, do we want to go to the final stage of public involvement when we don't have that final cost? There are costs in this document, but they're for those infrastructure elements like the pathway, which is by far the biggest. But what we don't have is what it's going to cost to protect the pathway, or if we don't protect it, how long does it last? And if the public later hears that, well, you know, they've all voted in favor of building the pathway, which is going to cost $20 million in the last 20 years, they might take a very different view if they thought it was going to last forever. And the other part of the answer they might get is, well, you know, for $5 million every 5 years, we can protect it. They might want to know that before they give their final input as well. So I just want to put that in front of council to see whether council thinks we should just delay that public final look by the public until we have those other numbers.
Thank you. So as we go through this conversation, hopefully people will comment on that as well, and we'll come. Could I look to staff though, just to first of all just answer Councillor Baxter, and I think it's a good concern about the long-term maintenance of these things and how it has been scheduled, or if it has not been.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think there's a couple of things I could say to help council's consideration of Councillor Baxter's question. One was that there was some work done several years ago that proposed beach nourishment as a method that would be useful in protecting the beach in front of the pump house. At that time, there was an estimate of $600,000 for sand that would protect that central portion of the beach through the deposition of sand in that area. And that had a design life of approximately 10 years. We've developed a team with our waterfront stewardship plan, as well as associated engineering and coastal modeling experts at DHI that are working with associated engineering. And so we have a team in place now to go to the next level of study, which would determine detailed costs and specifications of how that program would work. If council wanted us to get a better idea of the efficacy of that type of approach in costing, we would be looking at trying to achieve that within around the tail end of Q1 next year.
Thank you.
Your worship.
Yes, Mr.
If I may add some additional information, I think it's important for council to be aware that the current 5-year financial plan does not contain funding for the draft waterfront plan, nor the sediment management plan. And should the draft move forward, staff would bring a sediment management plan together in tandem with any budgets required to move forward on any elements of the plan that council funds through the budget process.
Okay, thank you. I will then go to Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe Mr. Borhill can answer a couple of things here about the bridge specifically. Like I believe I heard that the community didn't like it or respondents didn't like it. So why is it that it's here or that we're including it? Feels like, you know, are we taking a decision despite some of the feedback you got, or maybe you could just frame that for me here?
Certainly, and through his worship. Thanks for that question. It's a good one. We need to be very clear that the project team's recommendation based on the input from the community that highlighted concerns around not only the structure, but the people that would be brought by the structure to that portion of the lagoon, which is a sensitive area as it relates to the waterfowl and whatnot there as being a big issue. So staff recommended that not be part of the final plan. But despite that, the Waterfront Coastal Process Committee thought that it would be a good thing to bring back. I think the comments were primarily around the utility that it brought to the overall plan, and to the extent that it would be able to connect the proposed multi-use pathway with the improvements at Lagoon West Park. So that's a committee recommendation. It's important to recognize.
Okay, so, and then it's going to go out to the public with presumably with the bridge idea, and then you get some more feedback. Is that the idea?
So if council wanted to endorse the plan for public engagement as it currently stands, it would not have the bridge in it. If council wanted to enact the recommendation of the committee, staff could certainly make those changes prior to bringing it forth to the public. Council could ask for different amendments being made to the draft. The council could ask to have it referred back to the committee with the bridge or other changes, but staff are feeling it's time now to take the final draft to the public and get feedback on it as it currently stands.
Okay, I think I got it. So just my feeling on this is I love the idea of a bridge that connects the trail, and it feels like the right thing to do. But when we were down there recently collecting the broom bushes on a very rainy day, I might add, but it was pointed out that all those shrubs in that area provide the nesting areas and the hiding spaces for the little creatures. And so I get that, and I hate to say it, that I would love to walk across the bridge and stuff like that, but it's not just about me, it's about the people walking with all their multitudes of dogs, and then we've just opened up a corridor there for the hounds to be chasing down the wildlife. Sorry, that's a statement, Ian. That's what it feels like to me, is a bit of a highway for the hounds. Anyhow.
Yes.
My question specifically, the bridge itself, that end of the lagoon is popular for the larger waterfowl. I'm no biologist, but I've seen it with my own eyes. What impact does a structure like this have to do with their ability to, they're not as agile as a small bird, so they have a, you know, quite a distance to land and to take off. There's probably better terms for it, but are you understanding what I'm getting at? Because that end is popular with the geese and the nests and the young goslings and all that in that area.
Thank you for the question. Suffice to say, I'm not qualified to provide a detailed answer as it relates to the potential impacts of the bridge, but what we heard from different stakeholders in the community were, as you said, concerns specifically about disruption to nesting habitat and the foreshore in that area. It has previously been identified by biologists working on the behalf of Canadian Wildlife Service as a particularly important place for waterfowl, as it's where an inlet of fresh water enters the lagoon. And it's also something that would be studied as part of a permitting process if council saw fit to go to the next level of planning for the structure. We would be working with other regulatory bodies, including Parks Canada and Navigation Canada and Departments of Fisheries and Oceans, and those permitting requirements would include biological review, environmental assessment. Yeah.
So we're not painting ourselves into a corner.
Not necessarily, but there would be some sunk costs in those next level of planning. Yeah.
Yeah, so wildlife flight corridor. That's I guess that's important for lack of a better reference, because that area I mean, that is a bottleneck, and I see why that's where the bridge is going to go. And they do come in and they land in that direction because it's the way the water's pointing. That's all I got. Sorry.
That's where the water is pointing. Well, I'm not sure. Sorry, Councilor Parkinson.
Not an engineering term, water pointing. Your worship, I just wonder, I noticed we got a room full of consultants here. If we should skip over to some of the stuff later in the agenda, or we should agree now we're going to go later, or it seems unfair to have these people stay and only if we're not going to make it.
Right. Well, okay. So council, sure, let's just, I'll come back to you in 2 seconds. So council, I'll give you, when we go in camera, I'm going to be asking for an amendment on the motions to, actually, I'm going to ask you to drop some of the things tonight because of time. The things that can be dropped in the camera, I'm going to ask to drop tonight, so we won't have to go as late. I hear what Councillor Parkinson's talking about, and he's talking about that we have consultants here who are here for bylaws. And so if we were to look at moving the bylaws, I would need a motion by council to do that, correct? Mr. O?
So council could table the remaining items at 7.3 and move immediately to
Bylaws?
8 if you had that motion.
Okay, thank you. Are you making that motion?
I am.
Okay, do I have a seconder to that motion? Councillor Baxter has seconded that motion. So I'm going to clear everybody, or if you can, everybody drop off. Discussion? Sorry, okay. So what is happening is we are, forgive me the word, what was the word you used?
So I recommended to council that you set on the table the item that you're on currently, which is 7.4, 7.5, and move immediately to 8.1. You would lift up 7.4 when you finish the bylaw section.
So we'll come back to it. Yeah, okay. Discussion on this? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. So that will move us to 8.1. So let's work through that. 8.1 bylaw number 1908, land use amendment CD 31 3554 Ryder Heshdell Way. The recommendation is that section 10.36.4.1 of the Callwood land use bylaw number 151 1989, amendment number 186. CD 31 3554 Ryder Heshdell Way, bylaw number 1908 2021 be amended to add C, contribute to the Callwood Fire Hall Fund $525 per additional residential unit, and that Callwood land use bylaw number 151 1989, amendment number 186. CD 31 3554 Ryder Heshdell Way, bylaw number 1908 2021 be given third reading as amended. Do I have a mover for that?
I'll move that.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Parkinson, seconded by Councillor Logan. Discussion? Councillor Baxter.
I just want to clear up a misunderstanding about the past zoning that's arisen in the public on this topic, and I'll be as brief as and quick as it can be. But basically, when the local area plan for Royal Bay was first created, and it showed this property as designated in the OCP for apartments and neighborhood store. And the first zoning, and you can tell it's the first zoning because it included mining and quarrying and gravel processing, so that the miners were the ones who applied for it. The first zoning showed apartments and various commercial type uses on this property. And with very little changes, that zoning has carried on to this day. And all we're doing is editing a few details about what the retail uses are and how many parking spots are required and that type of thing. And I think there's been some misunderstanding about the neighborhood store. As I work it out, although I don't actually have a copy of that document, BCIMC, when they applied for rezoning for the neighborhood store, just added restaurant or coffee shop to the list. Apartments and commercial were still there. They've always been there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I will call the question on this. So this is for third reading. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. Moving on to 8. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just have a question.
Sure. Oh, hold on.
I guess I was thinking, okay, I knew what I was doing and I was going to vote in opposition to this because I was opposed to this development. However, I'm not opposed to them helping to pay for the fire hall. But I don't want to be duplicitous. I remain opposed to the development.
Wait, let me see this then. I'm just going to look for advice. May I sever it?
I mean, you certainly could sever it. I think the result of that will be likely that Councillor Day will oppose the motion for third reading.
Correct.
And approve the motion to include the contribution to the fire hall fund. I'm not sure that's a material difference, but that's council's call.
Yeah. Do you want to do it?
That would be great. Thank
Okay, so I will sever it. So the first is to contribute to the Callwood Fire Hall, $525 per additional residential unit. Those in opposition, nobody opposes. And now I'm on third reading for everything I just said. I'll call the question. Those in opposition, Councillor Day. Thank you. We good? Moving on to 8.2, bylaw number 1912, land use amendment CD 32 791 Drummond Way. This is for third reading. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting.
I'll move third reading.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Logan. Do I have a seconder? Second by Councillor Jansen. A discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Councillor Day opposes. Moving on to 8.3, bylaw number 1914, Callwood Main Sewer LAS enlargement, 3434 Krager. Help me, people. How do you pronounce it? Carger. Thank you. Carger Terrace. This is for first, second, and third reading. May I get a move? Moved by Councillor Baxter, seconded by Councillor Jansen. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Excuse me, you guys have to stay. Those in opposition, nobody opposes. Moving on to bylaw number 1915, Callwood West Sewer LAS enlargement for the same address. Moved by Councillor Baxter, second by Councillor Logan. Discussion? Yeah, and I'm sorry, this is for first, second, and third reading. Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you. Let's go back to 7.4. And this is Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Worship. Firstly, I guess I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to serve on this waterfront committee. I found it very fascinating, and as Councillor Day knows, there's been an awful lot of work done over the last year. We had to spend a year sort of understanding the 20-odd reports that went into this. So I really have enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the waterfront plan that were talked about tonight. The flood level and tsunami analysis was fascinating. It made me realize that I really wasn't a very good engineer. These guys are so much smarter than I am. But they're coming up with some fascinating stuff. The things that they can quantify and provide guidance on are hugely important. You know, they can sort of tell us that based on you know, a certain amount of sea level rise and predictable storms, you know, what's the blue water level going to be? What's the white water level going to be? How does that affect what we're building on the waterfront as far as walkways and that stuff goes? So I think there are some issues to do with the costing, as Councillor Baxter pointed out. You know, firstly, it's not clear to the Waterfront Stewardship Committee that Royal Beach is paying for the walkway from Royal Beach to the duplexes. Now, that was pretty crystal clear at the time we rezoned Royal Beach. So I think we should have some clarity on that at some point in the not too distant future. Yeah, the issue of beach nourishment, we started to get into last week. How much, where, what kind of material. I don't think that, I think the brainiacs that we got working for us aren't that far off giving us the answers. But I think to some extent the stewardship plan assumes some level of sediment nourishment, which was going to have a cost to it that does relate to the cost of the whole project. So they do tie together, and also it'll determine, you know, what is the appropriate elevation of a walkway where, you know, the maintenance requirements based on the storms expected and the sea level rises, you know, how do we trade off between building a walkway up 10 feet high so it never gets disturbed by the storms, or building it nice and low so it's affordable but maintaining the heck out of it. So those are some things that, as Councillor Baxter says, council needs to consider whether it's time to take this further, and probably could take it further as long as everybody understood that the costing was subject to perhaps some significant swings. And I guess I better talk about the Hope Bridge or Peace Bridge or whatever it was. So this one came when our old friend, the clause in the OCP that talks about a world-class waterfront came up, that how could we be world-class if we didn't have this, you know, incredibly sexy little bridge crossing the lagoon. So you know, there is some, and I think people think it could be pretty neat. I would say that the committee considers it aspirational. One of the things that wouldn't be neat if we could do it, and maybe we could do it, you know, but if we were going to do it, wouldn't be for quite some time, you know, probably several years, 10 years, depending on the plan and what council plans to do. And I think as we think about the bridge, we have to recognize that Lagoon West Park has got so much potential. You know, the call it the Two Waters development, if you like, but it was approved way back in the way as a quattro with the requirement to build a creek going down to that part of the lagoon, and, you know, in hopes of having salmon swimming up that, you know, for you know, sometime very distant future. If that happened, if there was some synergies with perhaps the First Nations on that site who have great history there, and, you know, maybe there was a pit house, maybe there was some other kind of structure that's, you know, lost in time. That so we don't know what's going to happen there. So I think that perhaps there might be things where this really did help, and maybe not. So as far as it being, you know, it's not as committed as the walkways and the other things are, but I think it's something that's worthwhile noting as perhaps it could be. I see the plan that Paul brought out today. He had it more at the southern end of the park, whereas my sort of instinct would have been perhaps at the northern end of that park, where maybe there's more or less biological interference. Don't know, but I would encourage council to consider it as being a pretty neat thing if it could be made sense of. Don't know if it will or not. And I'm also not sure that the removal, when it was removed from the plan, I think was the time when there was some pushback on the plan that had, you know, a kayak launch place and a viewing platform over the lagoon, which did draw some pushback. You know, maybe if those things had been individually, the pushback might have varied from structure to structure. I don't know. I don't have any comments on that, except to say, yes, there was public push to say don't put structures within the lagoon, but there might have been some structures that weren't as noxious as others, don't know. So just a few comments.
Thank you. Councillor Logan.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'm very impressed with this plan. I think I think the job that the committee and Paul and Ian, you guys have done is spectacular. The question, I too actually quite like the bridge, and from a connectivity perspective, and really feeds into our mountains to beaches a trailway system that we're trying to establish. And from an accessibility perspective, I think it provides some really great linkages. So my question would be, I'm assuming that any approvals for this bridge would have to go to some regulatory agencies to ensure that the sanctuary is A-OK. And more to Councillor Parkinson's comment there too, is it possible if to create additional runway for the birds that we could move it further north to provide that that runway or more habitat, less disruption to the fowl? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I'm happy to speak about this idea in as much detail as you like. I've been mulling it over for a better part of a year now. The regulatory process would include a number of different agencies. Because it's an overwater structure in what would be described as a navigable waterway, it would have to be reviewed by Transport Canada. So that's one definite hurdle. Department of Fisheries and Oceans would have an interest in this. It's within 50 meters of a marine environment, so it falls within a riparian assessment area, and there would be for any kind of project like this that has that would disturb intact habitat, there would be compensatory requirements. So if they approved it, you know, I think when we started to receive some feedback from Canadian Wildlife Service, organizations like Victoria Natural History Society, we had a number of people out on site walks. It was something that each stakeholder and individual members of the public kept coming back to as something that was something that they were not in support of. I very much liked the idea, which was why I brought it forward in the first place. I thought that in the long run, there might be compensatory measures that would make it seem more favorable. But in the end, after having those conversations with various stakeholders, I think I'm not a biologist either. I think I was enlightened to a certain extent in the sensitivity of that particular portion of the lagoon. And I might add that the mouth of the lagoon, where near the bridge, is also another sensitive portion of the lagoon from a bird habitat perspective. From an open space planning perspective, which is more my area of expertise, when you look at the circulation of pedestrian connections through that portion of the lagoon, and I'm thinking more in a broader context of linkages around Callwood, it's not that far from Lagoon Road. So if we imagine improvements on Lagoon Road and Anchorage back into the park, Goldfinch back into the park, it is conceivable to have very good trail or greenway type connections from the waterfront into those park spaces as well. Yes, world class, very lovely idea, but some significant barriers. Thank you.
I don't want to speak in favor of the bridge or against the bridge. I just want to talk about the practicalities that I think make the decision for us. The walkway is long and it's expensive. and it's going to take us at least 10 years to build it. We're going to build it in sections. And I don't see that we're going to build a few sections and then break off to build the bridge. We're going to keep going with the walkway. That's the fundamental thing that ties the whole waterfront together. So is it worth taking a decision now about whether we want the bridge in the plan when it'll be at least 10 years before it gets built? It'll actually be 10 years from now or so that we're thinking about, you know, getting the process started to get it approved. So that's going to be in the hands of a completely different council, and it may or may not make the budget at that time. So I think we should look at this as phase one of the plan, because it's stripped down to more or less the walkway and a few other things. And we can be aspirational about the bridge, but if we take it out of the plan, when the plan goes to the public, it's going to meet overwhelming support. And I think that's good for the city, not the city meaning the people in this room. I mean, the entire city, to be able to all get behind one thing.
Thank you. I'm just going to speak just before Councillor Parkinson, just because I haven't had an opportunity to. I concur with what Councillor Baxter said. I think this is a long-term plan. I'll be blunt though. I like the bridge idea. When it was first introduced to me, I pictured more like Swan Lake, and I pictured that sort of being able to experience nature, but keeping people in a designated area so that they weren't going off. And I was engaged with that. I was also engaged with the idea because at some point we're going to need to move our washroom from where they presently are into Pitt House Park. Or at least that was the plan. And I thought, well, this would be a lot nicer way to move people if people are on the waterfront and they need to get to the washroom, rather than having to go all the way around, or vehicles now traveling down Anchorage and parking in Anchorage to walk in and go to the bathroom and stuff. That I thought, oh, a pedestrian bridge would be great. But I also received a significant amount of impact or public comment from people who I guess I would classify as bird enthusiasts and stuff, and educated me as well, and educated me on the flight plan and everything else. And so as much as I'm aspirational as well, as you said, Councillor Baxter, I don't think this is the right time for it. And there's no point on us aggravating anybody, because it's not going to happen for 10 years. So let the next council, when they're ready to go. Yeah, I think the community supported the bridge at this point. That's just how I feel. Councillor Parkinson?
I'm going to argue the opposite for once.
Sorry, I need a motion to go past 10. It's 10 o'clock right now. Thank you, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Parkinson, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in opposition? Councillor Day opposes, which means we can't go, right? So we have to stop.
I'm sorry, it's philosophical. I will withdraw my opposition.
Okay, thank you. And I will appreciate that. Thank you.
You had Councillor Jansen too.
Oh, Councillor Jansen, are you opposing as well? Okay. Okay.
I'm not sure I agree though. I thought it was in the past we've done it as opposed.
Yeah.
Not.
It needs to be unanimous.
Sorry, a decision to go past 3.5 hours is a unanimous requirement.
So, Councillor Jansen? Okay, thank you. Well, as I said, we will try and expedite this as quickly as possible. There are some in-camera stuff that we have to deal with this evening. Okay. Councillor Parkinson.
I'll be quick. I just think that if it's not, even if it's a dash line with something, perhaps consider a future bridge or something on the plan, at least it's not forgotten. If it's nowhere to be seen and people, you know, councils will change and park plans will come along with no idea that it's even a consideration, and it won't happen. So I would like to see it stay in as, you know, as light a dashed line as you want and a little arrow. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So let's look to motions then. We have a staff recommendation that council consider endorsing the draft Callwood Waterfront Stewardship Plan dated November 18th, 2021 for the purposes of seeking public comment. And then there is a a Waterfront Coastal Process Committee recommendation in regards to the bridge. So would you like to make a recommendation of some sort to have that? Oh, I'm sorry. Never mind. Councillor Baxter.
I move that we delay the public process on this final draft of the report until we have more information on costs to protect it from weather and sea level rise.
Okay, do I have a seconder to that motion? Seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. All right. So this, I am looking for a motion to go in camera. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, we've delayed. Until it comes back. But we can, hold on to it because when it comes back, we can discuss it then. So I am now looking for under the authority of section 90.1. Oh, I'm sorry. Do I have one more?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Oh, appointments. Thank you. 7.5. This is from Ms. Wicken Lalonde in regards to the 2022 council appointments. Councillor Baxter.
I just want to say that I object to Councillor Parkinson campaigning to be re-elected to the committee earlier in his speaking.
Yes, that's true. I'm going to assume you're moving the motions.
I am moving the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Jansen has seconded it. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I think we're getting punchy. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. So now that moves us to in camera. Under the authority of section 90.1 of the community charter, the public will be excluded from the in camera. May I have a motion to exclude under 90.1A? Moved by Councillor Day, seconded by Councillor Baxter. Those in opposition? Nobody opposes. Thank you.